speed and height when they got. I don't know.
Well, it's up to you guys.
No, I'm okay with anything. The one thing that has been on the news lately is the U.S. shutdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like what the hell happened?
Wait, isn't that today? Because it's the October. Wait, no.
No, it's like in 2 days or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like Obama was like.
Oh wait, they already started. They already laid
already
off
started.
a couple of thousand people, I think.
It's just like, where did this come from?
No, yeah, it's like.
It was just like only in the last few days. It was
Yeah.
like, if this doesn't go through, then the US government.
So I don't know.
What? Let me click on this link.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you've heard about Ted Cruz. He's a senator or something in Congress.
Wait,
Name
isn't
the
Ted Cruz also the black guy from? No, that's Terry Crews.
Alright.
What's this?
The guy, he did some of the Old Spice adverts, not the hello ladies, the other one. And he was in, what was it, The Expendables, I think.
Oh yeah, that guy. He's the
Is
guy.
that
who's-
Terry Crews? Yeah, I think that's
Terry
Terry
Crews,
Crews.
the guy who has massive dancing pecs.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
guy.
in that Old Spice.
Yeah. So Ted Cruz is a super Republican who's against healthcare reforms, which is the new healthcare system. It already says Obamacare, which is basically the same as the previous one, but it's more socialist in general.
Slightly.
Yes, slightly. It's like American socialist. It's not really. So I mean, it doesn't even come close to like what the NHS currently provides, or what anywhere else provides, like in the Western places. Yeah. And so, with this Ted Cruz guy, doesn't want this to happen because I'm assuming that he's got insurance companies who are sponsoring him or something like that. So, what is happening is that he went to the Senate floor at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's a bill that Congress has to pass to approve funding for Congress, which is ridiculous. I mean, you know.
Well, it's understandable, but it just seems like one of those kind of what?
Yeah, it's like they do that, right? And what Ted Cruz did is that he got to he got his hand in the bill, and he got to include a language in the bill that prevents Obamacare from going through, from getting funded.
Did you see what I posted? I think it was yesterday about. Have you seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Whose Day Off?
It's just this like classic film from the 80s.
No.
Admittedly, I haven't seen it, so but it kind of parallels this whole thing. Because Ferris Bueller's Day Off is basically about Ferris Bueller, who decides that he's just not going to go to school.
Okay.
And it was like his like a kind of rebel. He just wants to do his own thing, and it just parallels it. So there's all of this, but meet Ted Cruz, aka Ferris Bueller.
I think this is where I know how this thing happened. I think I saw this.
Yeah, and then like I thought this kind of summed up the whole what's going on for me, and I thought meet President Obama. He really doesn't like Cruz. And then blah 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 blah. The measure of that, you know.
Huh.
But, it just kind of sums everything up. And then there was a filibuster from Ted Cruz.
Yes.
That went on for 21 hours. I think.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
That also is ridiculous, but that was a filibuster. Which is good. I mean, it's kind of good, but you know.
Yeah, and Obama waits. Yeah, so at the moment.
Yeah, so, this guy, what he did. I like this face. I'm sorry. Yeah. So, what he did is that he got to, in the language of the.
Max, feel free to use the cushions.
In the language of
the. My cushions, so I thought
use it back. Feel free to use the other cushions as well.
Yeah, so in the language of funding the Congress, what Ted Cruz is that he included some sort of. He got to the Speaker of the House, who is sort of his friend or something, to include in that language another language which defunds Obamacare, if passed. And about like 70% of Americans or something want Obamacare, so the congressmen are not voting for this. And what he did is that he had a filibuster because he got shot down about this, and he had a filibuster for hours and hours and hours. And during that, he read Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham.
Yeah, I only know about that bit because it was on the BBC.
Yeah, exactly. So he was talking about Obamacare. And what happened is that Congress apparently can't come to a decision because they have to pass the bill for this thing, but they can't.
For the funding right now because it's tied up.
Yeah, and the problem is they have to take that language out of that bill, and that will take time, and it's close to the deadlines, and they have to get it out of the language in time for the president to sign, which he has to, apparently.
Yeah.
So,
but he won't do it if it defunds.
Yeah, exactly.
He said he vetoes anything.
Yeah.
That defunds the
I don't know, but I think so. I don't know. Anyway, that's why American trash won't be collected for the next couple of days. Because apparently,
is that one of the first things?
Yeah, the trash goes away. About 400,000 defense individuals, people working in defense, go away, and some of the IRS gets shut down, and some of their transport, some of their mail. It's crazy. It's not like a small section of the government.
Yeah,
it's a big chunk of it.
Well, yeah, it's everything.
Yeah.
Like, just the little slices of everything.
Yeah.
Why would the deadline of the bill be? Why would they cease funding straight away? Why wouldn't you have a bill that gets you funding for like the next year? Like, starting in January, we'll pass this bill now.
I don't know.
Funding for.
See, I always wanted to go to America for my PhD and just live there eventually, but most recently, in the past month or 2 months, I've been like, I'm gonna go to one of the Nordic countries. Like, I'm gonna go to Switzerland or Sweden. Switzerland's not really Nordic. Yeah, like Sweden. Or Finland or Norway or something like that.
I heard Sweden was quite good.
Yeah.
PhDs. Well, they're all quite good.
Yeah, and plus, they're
good to Tenerife.
Yes, but I don't do astronomy.
Yeah, but you could learn.
Did you know that marine biology people go to Barbados for 2 weeks to dive at some point?
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't know
that. They did in their first year, didn't they?
The summer of first year, I think. Or second year.
Second, I think. Yeah,
there was a guy in physics in my year. He's practically a genius. He works really hard. And he was doing, for a summer placement, fluid mechanics. He was just looking around. And then the placement he got was at the Knox, but it was fluid mechanics, so it was still physics, but with the marine biologist. And he had to spend 2 weeks out at sea on a ship, I think. I think maybe it was Barbados, so I don't know.
Yeah,
somewhere that seemed quite pleasant. But he was like, oh, this is not my kind of thing.
Oh my god!
Because he's more theory.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, I had to contend with seasickness, and 2 weeks, but I'm finally back. And I was like, wow.
Oh my god, no, I would love to go to Barbados regardless of...
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying that to shame him or anything, but it's a perspective, but he's practically a genius. Yeah, he audited loads of modules. I think pretty much each semester from first year, I think he always did he always did an extra module, I think.
Okay.
Maybe not in first year, but second year onwards.
That's not a bad idea, actually. Because if they don't let us audit it...
Just go along to the lectures.
Yeah, and then take the module.
But then, this is what I realised, that MITU, Wikipedia, Stanford, Oxford, all the lectures are on there for free.
Yeah, exactly.
You are paying for the paper and the qualification. Don't get as in the resources, and I'm not saying that's bad or anything.
Yeah, you're paying
I'm grateful for it. Just, I realised that, when I didn't get wave physics at first, I went to Walter Lewin's lectures on MITU, and then I understood the stuff. And I thought, oh, now I can go back to the notes that we had, and everything is much clearer to me now. Again, that's nothing against the lectures or anything. I just thought, all this information's out there. I mean, whenever I get stuck on a problem, Wikipedia, hyperphysics, all from alpha. It's just go on the internet. It's a free information. Well, relatively speaking. So, what am I paying for? Because effectively, I could not go to lectures.
I think in total, we are paying for stuff like meeting other people.
I think it's the resources. The lecturing time, the resources, the facilities, etc., that keep the uni running. Because, this could be the topic. Because, like I said, most of the stuff we could actually, the academic side, we could, at least for our stuff, for physics, we could get off the internet.
Yeah.
And then it would help to have, members of staff at hand, the academics at hand, to say, I'm stuck on this. Can you help me, please? So in that sense, but then of course that kind of prompts, is that worth the £3,000 or £9,000 a year? If that's what you're doing, in which case I would say, well, that's kind of an outright no. But then, a university primarily is meant to be a place of learning. That is traditionally what a university is. It's where you go to learn. And then all the other stuff, like the extracurricular, the social stuff, that's all secondary to it.
Yeah.
But I would argue that possibly argue that in our current society, research just isn't valued. Knowledge, for the sake of knowledge, just isn't valued that much. That if people were to say, we want to have this university so people can learn, the secondary stuff is the social stuff, the extracurricular sports and all of that. But will you fund us, the government, will you fund us for the research for the sake of research? And like, no. Because, which is, on one hand, it's understandable because the government has an onus on a responsibility on all aspects of society.
Which should include education.
Yeah. So research should be a big part of that. But now you have established research councils because it's a case of that's where you go for money. We'll keep the buildings running, which is what the £9,000 fees are for.
Okay.
No, not the buildings, but as in
the people.
Because they still say, like the uni still say, even though the fees have gone up, we still get practically the same amount, and just more goes back to the government.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So it just
again,
this is very
sense.
well. As in, so say like when I paid 3,000 or 3,500, the university, for example, I don't know the exact figures. I don't know the ins and outs.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously what I say lightly, but say £1,000 of the 3,000 went to the uni, then 2,000 went to the government, and now with the £9,000, practically the same amount apparently goes to the uni. So 1,000 goes out, and then £8,000 goes to the government. And whether that's going to the government for the government to reallocate back to
or not.
Higher education as they see fit, I don't know. Again, I don't know the ins and outs, but.
But then what's the incentive for, say, Southampton University to up their fees and some other university to keep their fees at a lower level? What does Southampton get from upping their fees to £9,000?
I think it's still they have to pay the government, or I don't know how this works. That's the thing. So yeah, so it could either be a case of actually they do get more money, or is it they get all the money from the start, but then they have to give the government money. So whether it's like, let's say with the £3,000 fee example, perhaps it's the case that £1,000 goes to us so we can actually develop and expand our university and the research in all aspects that we see fit, and then £2,000 is costs to the government of, I don't know, electricity, resource handling, training, ticking all the boxes for the government standards. In which case, maybe that's what they mean by goes back to the government.
Okay.
So it could be, as if that's the case, then with the £9,000 fees, it could be the case that the government's now increasing the charge.
Yeah.
Because there was a whole case of, now I don't know if they've passed it, but talking about selling off the student loans to the private sector. So currently, all our loans are with the government.
That's a bad idea.
And I don't know if they've actually done that because I know there was a petition against it because the idea was there, and then I remember soon after that I saw quite a few newspaper articles all saying that, well, it's been confirmed. So now I don't know what's going. I haven't followed up since, but
Fair enough.
yeah, because if that's the case, then the loans are completely unprotected and subject to the whim of the private sector.
Yes.
So.
See, okay, so you both, I think, know Nina.
Yes.
Yeah.
Marxist.
Yes.
Yes.
But I remember this is public.
What? Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's we always talk in the house about this type of thing.
Yeah.
And she always talks about how doing this type of stuff, which is like the private sector taking over all these little bits and pieces that are being taken over, is going to eventually be bad because they are driven by profit rather than the voice of the people. And well, she has a point, but what I again, this is the first argument the first talk that we had in the beginning, where if we think a certain way, then we can stop this stuff as a society.
Oh wait, the first talk we had.
Yes.
Oh, I think you meant like you and
me. We. But
that thought park talk.
Yeah, yeah, but that's a little. It needs something more, right? So we can't just be like, well, I think this way and you think this way, and if I tell my friends this happens and this happens and this happens, I'm starting. I've been seeing this way is that yes, every little bit helps, but every little bit helps above a certain level. It's like there's a threshold. If you don't get above that threshold, then you fall down. Like, for example, this threshold was about thinking and thinking by a certain philosophy, so that you affect your society in the way that all the people who believe in that philosophy will affect their society as well eventually. Okay. So what happens is that apparently, based on what Marxism says, is that all the stuff that it says will happen has been happening, as in the private sector gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and your economic crashes will get more frequent, and the gap will get larger as the private sector gets bigger, and the population of the people on the bottom will get larger and larger, and the guys on the top will get smaller and smaller. Now, I don't know how accurate this is right now, because I really don't know, but it seems to be, from what, from just a little bit of news that I'm exposed to and here and there. And the problem with that is that eventually what the Marxists say is that they're going to have a revolution of the worker, and they're going to take over the government in a way that the majority are happy, because the majority are the ones who are revolting. And then they're going to have a dictatorship for a while people get used to this new communist type of society.
Well, yeah, because you can imagine. Well, I could imagine that if the majority are the workers, then how are they represented in a efficient, I say, quotated, would be the unions, and so there's a union representative.
Yes.
And that would be the element of dictatorship. And I'm not saying the union representative is malevolent or malicious or anything like that, but it would just become like that.
Yes,
there would be a case of, right, we the voice elect you to be our spokesperson.
Yes.
And then that is kind of the voice of the people. Revolution happens. People say, well, naturally you're going to be the one in charge. And then now people will think, okay, now we're in a place to make our decisions and our voices heard. That's when again there will be conflict and dissent. That the spokesperson may think, well, I'm the one in charge. This is what I think is best. And whether they actually discuss in a proper council of sorts or not remains to be seen if that.
Yeah, exactly. And happen. So I
told. In reality, you still end up with a small. Decisions can't be made by a big body of people because it just becomes infeasible.
Yes.
Because there are so many. So in the end, you have to.
Which is why society must be educated.
Well, yes, and education is good, but you ultimately end up with a small group of people making the decisions, because if you could consult forever, eventually the decision needs making.
Well, this is the case, like when Ali was saying about, so I was surprised when you said 70% of Americans want Obamacare apparently, which is why the congressmen won't go for signing the bill because it defunds it. Whereas, kind of, you could say the government here at least, or again, this is just based on my loose observations, so it could be completely wrong. It's kind of, people vote for the MP and their constituency because they will be the representative of the constituency's voice.
Yeah.
But then what just ends up happening is they vote a person because the person says they'll do what the people want. And they kind of do that for a bit, and then afterwards it just becomes the MP starts voicing their own, it's their own voice, and then you see these Like when there was a whole discussion, the House of Lords or Commons, I think it was Commons, that were doing the should Britain intervene in Syria if weapons of mass destruction, if chemical agents are found or not, if they are found, and then most of the arguments back and forth just seem to be egocentric in the sense of I think this, I think that, and let's take digs at each other, and then go back to the serious point of thinking. Well, one is like this is quite a serious issue, and you're just taking shots at each other. But then there was one MP, I can't remember, and hopefully there were more, and maybe I just missed out on it. But there was one MP I saw, and he said, "My constituency has said this, blah blah blah." And it's like he's actually he seems to actually be representing the people. He seems to be doing his job. Yeah, but so on one hand, I think the government here seems to be. You put people in power because they're meant to speak for you, but then they just speak for themselves.
Yes.
But everyone's okay with it because they were voted in a democratic way on paperwork.
Yeah, exactly. So the point is that any system of government that relies on a small group of people ruling on a larger group of people without supervision of the larger group of people is going to have the same problem. Which is either it's going to be a dictatorship, or people are going to feel underrepresented, or you're going to have something worse, which is what we sort of have, which is some people sort of feel represented, but they're being lied to, and they don't know if they are, and they don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So which is now, and so if there is going to be something that works, it's going to be something that gives only certain types of action to certain people. And I don't know if it's like that. So
and how do you pick which people get which privileges?
And what types of action are you talking about?
So for example,
I say privilege.
For example, right now an MP, what can an MP do? They can vote on a very large range of issues.
Well, they can vote on every bill that goes through.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't matter what the bill is about. If it's about, for example, I don't know, funding the sciences, maybe they go and talk to their science advisor and they come back, or something like that. But ultimately, they've got veto power over that.
Yeah.
I think that's wrong. Now, I know that sometimes, like, the thing that the science advisor says is against the thing that the agricultural guy says, so that there must be some sort of, talk about that.
But this is the thing. They're called civil servants. And I'm not saying the whole slavery way.
Yeah.
But the whole, I would consider MPs as technically civil servants because the whole point is they are elected to represent the voice of the people. So you serve what the people say.
Yes.
Now, that in itself can have problems because if the people are not educated in said matter, then it's quite you can just do scaremongering or whatever just to win people over or push them away from one idea or the other. But sorry, as you were saying.
Okay, so so I just realized that if I continue on with this type of argument, I'm going to end up with some sort of government where nothing really gets done because
bureaucracy.
No, not even like that, because bureaucracy is something always apparently is getting done, but it's not anything useful.
Yeah.
But
you'll end up with a point where nobody can agree because they're all.
Yeah, and
but they filed the paperwork to say.
Yeah. So basically, so the problem is that, in my opinion, that you can't give any one person too much power because, from what it appears, humans, including us, of course, are not capable of processing the complete repercussions of all of their decisions on a very large group of people, and taking themselves out of the equation.
Yeah.
That's not an easy thing. I don't think I can do it.
No,
if
I don't think we're not biologically wired to be able to do it. I don't think.
It's like a hard thing to do, and unless somebody's gotten training from the beginning of, I don't know, from maybe 10 years old, and that's also a whole new,
What if
issue.
you're practically, just theoretically, what if you're purely just serving the needs of the people, as in the sense that this is a very crude model, but say it was just 60% of the people vote this, 40% vote against. Okay, so 60% done. That's it. Just as simple. Like, say everything was just based on voting. Which is theoretically what it's meant to be.
Yes, but then you come back to the problem that you said.
Voting on every issue.
Yeah, but so we come back to the problem that you said, which is scaremongering.
Yeah, if the people aren't aware of it.
And at the same time, you give the people who aren't fully aware of the fact a voice. So
see, this is the thing though. With democracy, everyone has the right to vote. Everyone has, otherwise, and that's one of the cornerstones of democracy, that everyone has the right to vote. Everyone has a say in the matter. But what if people have no clue? Then who determines who has the right and who doesn't have the right? And then that prompts, okay, well, let's give qualifications to say this person is qualified to make a judgment in this case or not. But then the qualifications become almost arbitrary, because it's a case of, right, if we actually went for a thorough thing to actually check if that person knows enough or not about, or actually knows what they're talking about, then that would be it takes up too much time costly. Let's find a quick way which introduces degeneracies into the system, where a clear example I would say would be just a simple exam system. I mean, like, you could go through so many exams just doing the exam technique and knowing how to play the exam system rather than whether you actually know it or not. As in, you could give me a paper and I could probably whittle off all the answers that it needs, and then if you were to question me, like in an actual Viva or something, and say, okay, well, what if you were just to change this and do that? How do you think that would affect the situation? Like, well, I have no idea, which is what I don't like about the exam system and things. But that's just an example of where I could see it going if, the whole case of give everyone the right to vote. Okay, first problem.
Yeah, the whole thing is exactly, if you devise a system, then what you're going to get out of that system when you subject people to it is you're going to get the result of the system. You're not going to get the result that you want necessarily. So, for example, with the exam, for example, with the exam thing that you put, we are assuming we have two completely different sets of assumptions when you put the exam on. The first set of assumptions is that people who go into university, they want to get educated and they really want to learn these things throughout their study. And the second set of assumptions is that, well, we don't really believe our first set of assumptions, so we're just going to have to test them in a way that they can't trick us.
I'm slightly confuzzled.
Yeah, you're losing me too.
Right, so the first set is that we believe that anybody who goes into university is willing to put their time and effort and learn all these things as much as they can.
Who's making the assumption?
The person who's setting up the education system.
Okay.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And the second set of assumptions is that is the one that is the cause of having exams. Why would you have exams if everybody is, really willing to learn and is always learning? So you would have exams because you don't completely believe in your first assumption.
But isn't it also to measure their knowledge? Because that's the other, like some people, personally I mainly went to uni, well, there were several reasons, but one of them was I just genuinely want to learn more about physics. I want to just keep learning. But then a lot of, there's a quite a significant camp of people that go to uni for the employability prospects. It's a case of, like even the NUS president from a couple of years ago, I think, was saying, well, the main reason why people go to uni is that we should orient it towards their career prospects. So that's what we should gear the whole university experience. Not that people don't go to learn; it's because they want to go and get a job out of it, and that's helpful. But that should be a product of the system, not the cause of the system.
Yeah.
So it's the whole kind of work to live / live to work. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. This is just an idea. It's not really any practical at all. But the idea is that when you have exams, you're going to have one result out of the exam is you're going to have people, if you're going to have exams that are necessary, you're going to have people working hard to get over the exams. Maybe some people are working hard to get over the exams because they know and they want to learn. Some people are going to work hard and get over the exams because,
they need the grades to be employed.
They need the grades. And so when you want to design the exams, then you have a problem because you can't test what somebody knows. You can only test their ability against a certain test that you come up with. So
you can only observe that against the measurements you're taking.
So anyway, ultimately wait, no, I've lost myself. Hold on.
Just gonna drop this in there as a reminder.
Yeah, go on.
Just based on what you just said. Do you think what we observe is then defined by how we're measuring it? So in terms of physics, so do we measure particles the way we do? As in, do we observe them the way we do solely because that's how we chose to measure it? Which might seem really obvious and simple, but to me that has a profound effect in the sense that how I perceive the world, how I define the world is based purely on my measurements, which is of course a given of quantum mechanics in the sense of course once you observe it you've collapsed the wave function into that before it was everything effectively, and now you've made it that.
Yes, but doesn't the mystery of that, the mysterious aspect of that, come out of the fact that we are used to needing an absolute definition of the state of a system? For example, it's a particle.
Yeah, but it's just quite a mind-blowing. I think I've just wrinkled my brain.
This is good, yeah. Yeah, I know, it's...
Well, I know, yeah, I haven't, but physics has wrinkled my brain.
Well, we always bring our own point of view to a problem, don't we? Or rather, we always bring our past experiences and then observe the problem. We have expectations when we perform an experiment. We undeniably expect to see something or other, and so we're geared towards seeing such and such.
No, yeah, we see the patterns where we want to see them.
Yeah, well, what I really liked today was that we were together in the Coherent Light, Coherent Matter by Hendrik. And he gave an example of say somebody's observing a train station. And what this person sees is that they don't know what a train station is. What they see is that they see people, start to gather around the train station, then a train comes. And then the people go into the train, and the train goes. And then people start to come again, and then the train comes again.
People cause the train.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's really nice. You're like, we may well have a lot of stuff like this that we believe in right now. I can't think of any examples, but for example, one of the things that it could be is that our observation causes something to collapse into a certain state. Is it our observation that causes it?
Well, that's like this is where I realise that most of us are introduced to the concept of quantum mechanics or some of the themes of it.
Interpretation.
Yeah, but as a kid, one of those questions that the riddle questions is if a tree falls on a forest that no one's around to hear it, has it actually fallen? And then back then I just thought it was pretty philosophical. And then after doing quantum mechanics, I thought this is effectively what it is. As in, once you make that measurement, you've made it an observable, so it's physically happened. But before you measure it, before you do the observation, it is in a state of either both yes and no.
But that goes kind of to a certain extent, but then you have a tree falls in the wood, and actually a tree has fallen in the wood, it would have happened. I mean, whether or not I choose to observe every tree at the same time.
It or not.
Well, yeah, but it's still an observable.
But that's based on intuition and past experience.
Yeah, but it's
the question
like
is,
if you're
what is
doing
an
an experiment
observable?
with like spins of electrons or something like that, and you have, say, you decide not to measure the spin of one electron and the spin of another electron. It's still.
You have to consider the effect of your observation.
Yeah, if you've seen the electron, you still it still had a spin, even if you choose not to measure it.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing, as in the essence of it, isn't it? Well, this is how I that the essence of it was you don't. Prior to the measurement, it could have been either the spin up or spin down. Prior to that, you can't definitively say anything about what its spin state was.
No, but the point is that you can, and you have to say that it's both.
Well, but by saying it's both, as in it was up and down.
Yeah.
So, but then once you make the measurement, you say it's down.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's up.
Yeah.
It's one or the other. So it has collapsed into that spike of the waveform.
Yes. I mean, this is the view that we're taught right now.
Yeah.
And another problem is that, from what I understand, it's pretty, what do you call it? Hard? It's pretty
difficult?
set. Huh? No, it's pretty
established.
Yeah, because of what was the lack of hidden variables. So, which I assume basically means that somehow we have found out as a community of people.
Isn't that from Bell's inequality?
Yeah, that there is nothing that we have ignored when we observe an electron, and we say this in both states in a certain way, which is a little mind-blowing for me.
Yeah.
But you know, I guess Bell's inequality says that, because it must say that if it says that there are no hidden variables.
And Einstein was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. So. But from what my understanding, that doesn't necessarily mean it may be in both states, but well, no, wait. Yeah, you know, there are loads of collapse models out there trying to define how something collapsed, right, and describe how something collapsed, but they can't so far, ish. And I mean, they can, but they only can, and then it's like time dependent and it changes in reliable.
I don't know them in depth.
Yeah, okay.
I'm familiar with
some collapse models.
There is something happening there that is causing a lot
I don't
of problems.
know. I attended a lecture last year. I think you were there as well. There's this guy in Free Guards Friday afternoon stuff.
And the colloquium.
Yeah, okay. There was this guy who was talking about collapse models, and he had this massive equation on his thing. Anyway, basically what it said is that he had a constant. Everything was working out except this little constant that he had to adjust for every measurement or something, but just a little bit, like not a lot. And so if that is true, if he can predict how something collapses, then doesn't that mean that it is not in both states at the same time? If you can predict what it's going to be.
Something dependent on which way it's going.
Yeah.
No, I follow.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Max, are you okay?
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about the tree thing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. I've been watching a lot of Star Trek recently.
Which one?
Next Generation. Season 5.
I think apparently season 3 is quite the humanist season.
I don't know what it was about, like one episode.
I don't know, one of the episodes is like they violate the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
And they all think of Picard as a god.
Oh yeah.
And then Picard's like, so you people live in huts? And they're like, yeah. And he goes, well, did you always live in huts? I was like, no, we used to live in caves. So we wore like different clothes and hunted with bows and arrows. How do you think your people back then would feel about you now?
See us as
I was like, well, they wouldn't understand us. I was like, do you think they'd see us gods? Like, yes. I think I understand you now.
Yeah, exactly. I like the episodes best where it's some aspect of Data's life.
Yeah, well, because Data is always about analyzing the human condition.
Yeah, exactly. And like when there's this episode that he creates another android as child.
Yeah.
And then some Starfleet admiral says we must take this android, the new android, back for study for a good environment and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then he's like, why? He said, well, because you're not equipped to handling this. Are you saying that I'm not a good parent? And then he's like, well, not for this android. So how about Data says, so how about you when you had your first kid? Were you like a bad parent too? And this is really, it's like, well, yeah. It's just nice.
I do like Data as well.
Yeah. But it's.
What was that?
Anyway, what I was getting to with Star Trek is that whenever they talk about their science, they never talk about even close to what we talk about. They talk about some made up, new fancy words and stuff, which sort of it sends this message out that whenever you are born in a certain era, because you don't have to learn most of the stuff that the past people have done. You just sort of have to start like at the edge and try to push it a little further. And that's I've always wanted to know what everybody's done, so that I understand perfectly.
Surely there's a whole build from first principles.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's not only that. I'd like to know where the first principles came from, and so far, because that's the only way to get it. For example, when I'm learning relativity, I'd like to learn how Einstein thought about it, and then how they're teaching us, because they're massively different.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I don't know where the balance is. I don't know where.
Yeah, it's tough because you want to go back that way.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is that is history of science.
Yes, that's true.
I was going to say I'm reading, but I'm actually listening to an audiobook at the moment called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions.
Yeah.
I can't remember who writes it, but it's basically talking about the way different paradigms become kind of entrenched in scientific knowledge, and then you get scientific disciplines which just work within that paradigm. So you have a fixed set of rules that have been kind of set out. For instance, Newton comes along and he has the principle, and he has Newton's optics, and basically that's taken as given. And then people can still take that text and do science within that paradigm. But then something else comes along and you get Einstein, and suddenly there's relativity, and this is a big new idea, and then you have another paradigm. But it always comes down to there are the big changes, but then we're doing these paradigms on a smaller level as well. So we basically just build up a body of... It's sort of... We think it's knowledge, but actually it's just a way of doing science.
Yeah.
And it's a series of rules which we can then apply and do experiments within. And actually there are quite a lot of quite separate sets of rules within the kind of overarching structure of science, which are just... we kind of just end up getting focused down into just because that's how science makes progress. But there's a kind of... you're thinking that maybe you want to step outside these rules slightly and think kind of individually and just, I want to form my own ideas rather than the ideas that the paradigms kind of dictate to me. And then I think that's probably where the revolutions start, is people coming up with something new and seeing how it goes. But what makes their... I don't know.
Them to come up with something new?
I'd say there are two things there. Well, one is when you question the assumptions of the established system. So, like classical mechanics lasted for a long while because it seemed to work as far as we were concerned. To the extent of our intuition and experiences, classical mechanics was fine. But one of the, I guess, implied postulates of it was things happen instantaneously, gravity acts instantaneously. And then Einstein was like, well, hang on, if the sun disappeared... I don't know if he actually asked this, but this is how I read it. Again, this might be case in point. If the sun were to suddenly disappear, does that mean we would, given that we know it takes 8 minutes for light to travel from measurement, somehow, Does that mean we would see the sun? Would we see the sun disappear 8 minutes after we've left its orbit, or what?
Yeah.
And then that was okay. So
you suddenly got
so it was a case of that's where it came that light would be the fastest thing, and you don't get instantaneous. Thus, all this new science came, like the modern age of physics on that front came along. But then now you could say, well, what if we question? Because if you look at it, you think, well, the way I kind of see things, I think there's not really much left to discover in terms of a big scientific revolution.
But I don't think it's like that.
Yeah, because it's just perspective. So maybe now, if you want to be like a gold digger of science, you should start doing physics where light isn't the fastest thing, and then look at all the you can look at all the implications of. Hang on, what if we got rid of C as a barrier? What happens to physics then? Yeah. And then it's like, oh hey, unification theory.
So this guy, I'm reading a book. I told you about it a little while ago. It's this Indian philosophy type guy. It's Krishnamurti, is his name, and it's a little hard to read, not because of any words or the ideas or anything, but it's because as you read on, what he says is that literally, and I'm like almost quoting, and he says that what you're looking for will not be found in the room of a teacher or in some book or something like that. I'm like, well,
I'll put your book down there.
Yeah, exactly. And this idea goes on, and what's the whole? He's got like different chapters and different types of problems, and he's got like for the young and self-knowledge and whatnot. But the whole thing that he's talking about is that if you really want to be creative, and he uses this language very precisely, and by creative he means firstly create something, second create something that is not already here. So original and creative, he uses those, and this is the same word. It says if you want to be creative, you cannot conform to pre-existing systems and patterns that already exist. Well, pre-existing. So which is easy and difficult. It's difficult because you're sort of left in limbo if you don't, and it's also difficult because you'll have to come up every time you want to do something again. You have to just reevaluate yourself, and then.
How do you know you haven't been influenced?
Yeah, exactly, and which is practically impossible. And then there's the other aspect that's easy, is that then it's hard to work after you've gotten rid of it, but getting rid of it in the beginning is easy. So
discard all assumptions.
Yes, that's not hard.
Well, again, if you do it from the beginning, no, but
like now.
But now that's the thing. How can you? It's still possible.
Yeah.
And that's what I think I've done. That I started from scratch, as in, like at some point in my life, I just thought, hang on, let me just start from scratch. So I went through the whole solipsis routine of the only thing I'm certain of is my consciousness, and everything else, what falls through from that.
And this doesn't have to only get focused on one, like everything, which is on us. It can be focused on just a tiny thing, like you're trying to build a building, and you don't have to conform to the said rules. You can just.
But then, if you follow it back on principle, though, that's when you do question everything. Because you say,
oh yes, if you go with this.
Well, it's like, I'm going to build a building, but I'm not going to look at any other architecture. I'm just going to build it this way, but then someone could come along and say, like, why are you using those tools, those methods, and those materials? Like, that's a good point, and then chase that back.
That's not what I mean. I don't mean.
Well, then you come back to why you're building a building. What made you want to build a building?
What so and so did it. So I think it's like influence.
I don't mean discard the current advances that are working. I'm saying discard the assumptions through which those advances were made.
Yeah, as in don't confine them to being the only thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, we have I don't know. We have a. I need to find a good example for this. Like the train example. Okay, once the train station example. Once you have a model, you have an accurate model of what happens inside a train station. Mostly whenever you observe, say you can observe it only in the daytime. Whenever you observe it, you have trains come in, and you have people come, and then they go into the train, and then it leaves. So the model is that when people come, a train comes and they leave.
Yeah.
But that's an assumption. That I've made an assumption there. Okay, in making that model is that people cause the train to come. I haven't said that.
Motivation.
Yeah. For example, I haven't said it the other way.
Yeah.
As well. So I haven't said that the train
is going.
Yeah, is going somewhere. So that's why people are coming. Now that may not seem very, apparent. But when the difficulty comes here that you have to be able to observe everything accurately. So you see people come and you see the train come. Okay, so you need to observe these accurately.
Yeah.
And but that's all you know. So if you assume that, okay, I don't know.
No, I think it's still
you can't.
You can't have anything else. But why would you need a model if it's?
Indeed, the idea of building a model is immediately you start making assumptions. And if you are saying that you want to, even if you shed all your assumptions, say starting tomorrow, I wake up in the morning and I'm going to assume nothing about the world that I'm in.
Okay.
So then I will wake up and I'll get out of bed and I'm in a bed, I lie on the bed, I'm not falling through the bed. What is this falling? To the extreme. I don't know anything about gravity. I don't know what I feel like I'm going down. What is down? Why don't I go up there? There's a bright thing in the sky. The bright thing in the sky, it seems to go down and it comes up again.
That's knowledge.
Well,
talk about the assumptions.
If I gain knowledge, then I suddenly assume that so I observe a cycle of the sun and I see it's coming up and down, and so I then assume that it's going to do the same tomorrow, and I assume that it's going to do the same the next time, and I've got no foundation for that assumption other than my past experiences.
Yes.
And so it's the same as the train station with the people, and then the people cause the train to come, and then the people get on the train. You have nothing but your past experiences, so you start to make assumptions based on your past experiences. So you start to think, well, groups of people gather and trains come, that's what happens. And then you end up making assumptions.
Yeah, it's empirical. That's the thing. You effectively, in terms of like scientific knowledge, is just that which your assumptions hold with enough statistical certainty to merit it as scientific fact, which doesn't make it 100% concrete. As in, that's the thing. I think I said it at Thought Park that you can't actually prove any of the scientific theories as confirmed until the universe has run its course, even if that does happen, because that's when you've got the whole system. You've observed it across the whole system, and it's in all its variables. So knowledge is what we regard as knowledge, or at least scientific knowledge. Because that's the thing. Logic, I would say, is absolute. Now, again, like if I said 1 + 1 = 2, based on my abstract, because that's completely abstract, you can confirm that as truth or not. That's why that's why I would argue maths is a universal language, because it's of absolutes.
Why would it have to be universal? What do you mean universal?
As in, you could always, if I said to you that something based on physical observation, based on scientific knowledge, if I said, well, based on all my observations, this is fact. You could be, I don't know, like a being in a higher dimension, whatever, or something. That's actually, based on my observations, no. But if I were to say 1 + 1 = 2, there is nothing you could do, again, provided that we've made the same logical arguments, but that's the thing. Again, and people could say, well, that's subjective then, just as much as with physical things. But I would say, from the maths point of view, from the definitions of logic, it's all intrinsic. Everything follows through. That the conclusions you get in a mathematical argument are universal, as in they are constant. They cannot be. If I say 1 + 1 is 2, it's always going to be 2. It's never going to change by definition.
It's not subject to testing.
Yeah, it's an abstract truth, and it's an abstract concept, and therefore I would say can be defined as an absolute truth because it's abstract. There is no error there's no uncertainty in those statements, those experiments, because they're not really experiments. They're just natural progressions of logic. It just follows through.
But would you say that maths is the only maths? So does the maths that we have, the maths that we've developed is kind of a closed system, so everything's works in and of itself because it's a set of rules that sticks to, and you can work within those sets of rules.
I think pure maths is absolute. Again, you could say, well, is differentiation or not? Because things that were motivated by physical observations. So geometry, I would say, is iffy, but I wouldn't say that concrete. I would still have enough faith that math, even the geometric aspects, are absolute.
It definitely all works because it's
designed that way.
Closed.
Yeah.
Or for instance, okay, even going back to just counting, you have 1 and then you have 2, and therefore you have 2, and then you add another 1, and you've got 3, and there are definitely 3 things.
Yeah.
I think that's the fact anywhere, and you can always have a 1 of something and a 2 of something and a 3 of something, whatever you call it. Counting is
those
universal.
laws are
I think the laws of.
But then
there becomes a point where maths is something that we have to find, and we've decided to work within the boundaries that we have set for maths. And I wonder, is it possible to have another equally valid closed set of rules which can function in a similar kind of way? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would say, actually, yeah, because the problem you get with any base system that's not infinity is with decimals. If everything's integers, that works out quite nice. But as soon as like if I say what is 1 divided by 3? No, if I say is 0.9 recurring the same as 1? Mathematically I can show it to be the same.
Yeah. So it is.
But I would say that, well, that's the thing. Mathematically, they can be proven to be the same, so it follows that they are the same. But if that is the case, then why is 0.9 recurring, not 1? Why can you still distinguish?
You can't.
No. Physically, you can't.
But physically, you can distinguish between 1 + 1 and 2.
No, but as in, why can I say 0.9 recurring
is less than 1?
Yeah. And why can I say 1? Well, then, surely if they're the same, there shouldn't be 0.9 recurring or 1. It should just be.
D is 1 unit thing.
Yeah, as in 0.3 recurring plus 0.3 recurring plus 0.3 recurring is 1. Well, you could still say, you could validly still say it's 0.9 recurring, and then say which is 1. But you still have 2. Well, as some would argue, well, no, they're not separate values because you've just proven they're the same. But if they're the same, why give them 2 different names? Again, you could say, well, and I don't mean that in the terms of nomenclature, like 0 or 1 and unity.
Okay.
But I mean as in, you can construct 0.9 recurring, which for all intents and purposes, I would say, yeah, that definitely is 1. Because in our base system, it's the one that approaches 1 infinitely close. But it never actually reaches it.
But I think does it? Because by saying you've got an infinite number of 9s after a decimal point, you are essentially saying it's 1.
Essentially, again.
Yeah, but the 1 minus 0.9 recurring is infinitely small, as in 0.
And I think the problem is that when we think about it, the problem arises because in our heads what we're imagining is that we're writing a 9 and then a 9 and a 9, and we keep going, and we're adding a time constraint into it, so we're saying we never reach it. Okay, but the fact is it's a mathematical concept, and since it goes on to infinity, we can come out of that infinity, and then we can say it's 1. Because we don't have to write it all down.
You've approached the limit, which would be 1.
Yeah.
As in the limit is 1, so it's like, the distance between me and you, and if I were to go half that distance, and then half that distance, would I ever reach you?
Wait, yes.
So say the distance between us, and I traverse half of that.
Yeah.
And then I traverse half of that.
Well, mathematically you will.
Well, that's the thing. Say I keep going just half that distance.
Yeah.
Well, then, I think wasn't this one of Zeno's paradoxes?
Yeah, it was.
Well, then you would never reach that person because you're always getting halfway there, but you never actually get there.
Yes, but then again, you're thinking in terms of time. You're thinking, if you take yourself outside of time, just let that happen constantly. That is true that you can never stop it and say, okay, now you're here. But okay, so in a world.
Well, that's the thing. It's if there is no fundamental unit of length, for example. So if you could infinitesimally divide the space between us, you could effectively say, I will never get to point B. I will only get infinitely close to point B. And then that raises the question, is that the same as B? Right.
So, okay, so the problem, if there is a problem, the problem would be that when you want to prove that 0.9999 is equal to 1, what you do is that you multiply it by 10 and then you take itself out.
Yeah.
Right? So, but the problem with that is that you are sort of ignoring the time thing. So if you multiply it by 10, you've sort of moved your decimal place 1, okay? So you sort of boosted the time aspect on one end, and then you've taken itself out of itself, assuming that at the end somebody's still writing the 9s. So that is the problem. That is why it's hard to grasp. So we're not assuming the 9s are already there. We're assuming that somebody's writing them, and then, therefore, at the end of this proof, we come to a result which sort of surprises us.
I don't know. I think I'm still undecided about the time aspect, because I think by introducing the time thing that makes it physical, which would go with your argument of saying that because we're constraining it to our intuition.
Yeah. But I think 0.9 recurring is 1 written as a limit. So it's saying that, okay, we can define 1 as the limit of when you do 0.9 and then add another 9 and then add another 9.
So isn't that an approximation? 9s. As in, for all intents and purposes, 0.9 recurring, I would say, that's 1, because if you just kept going, you're effectively getting to 1. But I would say it's still not the same as 1.
If it becomes finite. And then we get into trouble but if we introduce a finite end to the 9s, then it's not 1. But as long as it's infinite and we accept the concept of infinity, then 0.9 recurring is 1. If we accept that it's infinite, and so therefore it just goes on until it is 1.
But then can we accept that? What is that concept of infinity?
Well, we've defined the symbol 0.9 recurring, and we've accepted that recurring means it goes on infinitely. So therefore, that's something that we have put on top of maths. That's our intuition put onto maths.
But so that's the thing. Does infinity follow through from logic? I would say yes. But then, am I being biased?
But there's space for infinity in logic. So there's nothing that prevents it from being.
Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of going to what I would say kind of going on about the type of maths we have. Could you have a different type of maths? Because say some being or race of hyper-intelligent being that
or just different intelligent maybe.
Yeah, well, yeah. As in, for them, it might just be it's like, what are you doing it that way for? This is trivial. And they
No.
You go.
What I'm curious about is that how many operations do you have to define in order to be able to derive everything else?
think that is the mathematicians have probably answered that question because maths has been defined. Probably.
Yeah, exactly. So like if you have addition, you would obviously have multiplication, and you would have, therefore, to the to the power of, what do you call that? Power functions. You have
yes, exponentials.
Yes,
Exponentials.
and at some point you'd have algebra because it's just convenient, and because you have the power
really
functions, you have logarithms.
Yeah.
Do you?
But then, yeah, you do. But then, what are surely in terms of fundamental operations, a power is just a multiplication or
Which
many
is an
multiplications.
addition.
So, do you consider that another operation?
Well, no, I just consider all of this stuff that I said an addition.
Yeah, I think it's just all addition
Yeah.
and subtraction, isn't it? Well,
Subtraction if you add in the other types of numbers.
I think you need to introduce 0 as well. Because
Yes, okay, so 0 because
I think you need 0 in order to then have subtraction. Because
you would have to go negative.
Yeah.
That's true. So, well, no, you won't need subtraction because subtraction would be addition. If you don't want to have subtraction, then you need 0 to have the minus numbers.
My mother says hello.
Hi. So we were saying, how many operations do you have to start with to be able to derive the rest of maths?
Isn't it just addition and subtraction?
But
Well, it's just addition, and then you
think
could
it's just
say
addition?
subtraction could be just the negative concept of numbers.
Which then we're saying maybe that introduces 0 because you need to have negative numbers.
Yeah.
You need to have
You need to have 0.
0.
Yeah, well, yeah, it cancels that one.
Yeah,
Well,
and,
okay, well.
I'd
yeah,
say
one,
the
you have
three most
minus one,
important.
so what's
Yeah, well, for me, the way I see an aspect of life is the three significant quantities are 0, 1, and infinity.
Okay.
So it's either, because generally my principle, because I try to live by principles, I generally have this approach of all or nothing.
Okay.
So it's a case of
or something. Well, nothing or something.
well, as in, this is the thing. So I would say it's all or nothing. So, would you lie in? So again, theoretically, ideally, would I lie in said situation? No. Is that because it works out for my benefit, or on principle? I would say on principle. Therefore, I would never lie. Again, pragmatically speaking, I guess if it was for life or death, but then I take that as an extreme limit. But I don't take that as, well, hang on, if I can do it then that, because then I keep approximating and then deviate, in my opinion. So if I set, going back to it, so if I say 0, 1, or infinity, so how that translates for me in a social sense is, either I would never treat anyone like some particular way, or I would treat everyone in some particular way, or there is something that is specific to me. Now I'm iffy with that bit because I don't like putting myself in this only applies to me, because then I think that implies that I see myself in a different way to the rest of humanity, and that introduces a whole element of, well, am I privileged or am I unique in that sense? But so they kind of, for me, that kind of complement the social.
Why not for everyone?
No, that's the thing. So I have 0, 1, or everything. So generally, I either have, well, I wouldn't treat some person like this, so I'm not going to treat anyone like this.
Okay.
Or I would treat one person like, or I would treat everyone like this. Or if I treat some people like this, then by extension I should treat everyone like this. And then for me, the whole one bit came from the concept of a soulmate. Okay. Again, that might like, oh, you're there. But that might sound all sort of cliche, mushy-washy or whatever. But then I think that introduces the pragmatism. That first it would be all or nothing, and then there'd be the concept of one. I don't mean one in terms of that one person, but just one in terms of there are limits to our condition.
Okay, but aren't you, by setting a set of principles to follow, inherently setting a rule which I'm not going to change those principles?
Yes.
Okay.
Based on those principles. But that's what maths is. You have these. Maths is just the stacking of principles. Well, no, maths is.
No, but it's flexible as well.
Is it?
Yes, because
Can you?
It is okay. The thing is, it is subject to additions to it, as in, for example.
I see what you did there.
No, for example, if I'm working in some, say, in someday in the past, I was working on a certain sort of idea, and then I saw that okay, I'm having a problem, and I introduced imaginary numbers. Okay, now that is a certain amount of flexibility that I'm allowed to do that, and everything else stays intact. Will I do that? Now I can't do something that is blatantly against maths. For example, I can't write 2 minus 2 equals 5 or something, because
you have to think about that one. Like, I have to make sure this isn't actually mathematically correct.
Yeah, because well, then I'm not, then it's just not math. It's not like I'm trying to get into math. I can create a new math and say that, start defining symbols and ideas in a completely intuitive way, and I can probably make up a whole set of rules that are self-consistent but are not relatable to anything but themselves.
Yes, which again, and you can probably do that, and it could well work as a math.
Yes.
And then you think, okay, so if we, as a society, if we had decided to go down the route of your 2 minus 2 equals 5 maths, and that was the maths that we defined as a society, and then maths built up around that, just experimenting in that set of rules, would we all now kind of be accepting that as kind of, well, yeah, it must be a universal truth?
Well, would I be able to use it as a tool as we do today?
Probably.
That's the question. Because if it's completely non-intuitive, then at some point it would have to connect with what we know now, so that
Or would we not just develop
the
a
same
new
things.
intuition?
Well, yes. The point is that if my 2 minus 2 equals 5, if my 2 minus 2 equals 5 is just my 5 is a 0, for example, or something like that.
Coming away from the symbols, I mean, okay, we don't, 5 can be 5 written, or it
No. I'm saying that if you don't, I'm not talking about symbols alone. I'm talking about, say, in this world of
the concepts.
Yes, in this world of concepts, you have every time 2 minus 2 equals, for example, I don't know, 5, which is.
Are you saying a quantity? So rather than cancelling out, you're saying just for argument's sake.
Yeah.
In this world of math.
Yes.
That taking something away from itself still results in something. Just say if that works.
Yeah.
Okay.
For example, right now, why is it that 1 plus 1 equals 2? Is that a statement subject?
PhDs and
that is not really ultimately subject to any mathematical proof, because it's the basis for everything else. And the way I see it, math is something that is much less a web than it is an upside down pyramid. So it's built on this one.
Well, yeah, and that's how it should be. So
yeah,
because you have a fun. That's why I like math, because it's all because it's logic. It's effectively all a priori knowledge.
Yeah,
it's not subject to flaw in terms of an external. My senses were tricked, or this isn't constrained by anything.
Exactly. So
it's the whole thing that you have your founding principle, which would be the principle of truth, and therefore, how would you define truth in a Boolean logic way? It's just zeros and ones.
Yeah.
So that's just, you could say that's a fundamental, and on that everything builds.
Yeah.
So, okay, 1 plus 1 is 2.
Yeah. Okay.
And where can I go with this?
Yeah.
And blah blah blah. And then you keep going, and you say, what other routes can I get there? And then multiplication, division, subtraction.
Yeah. So this comes back to our sort of assumptions, which I should say now intuition, is that right now I can't think of something else. I can't think of a different set of logically consistent rules, because I'm trying to confine some new thing that I cannot make, into the old thing that I know and that you would understand.
What if there is no other way, though?
So that's the
What if
question.
there is only one absolute truth?
I don't know.
And it's interesting, but then it comes back down to okay, so it's a pyramid. Pyramid analogy is really good. It's all built on this one kind of pillar, and then it's been accumulated in a cycle accretion of different ideas, but it's all self-consistent with that one.
So, is that the definition of the universe?
But then, but then there might be another starting point for the pyramid. You could start the pyramid somewhere else as well.
Exactly. That's what
completely. We can't picture it because we're at the top of the pyramid looking down.
We see a massive floor. We don't see.
Exactly. But there might be a way of starting a whole maths which is based on another founding tenet which we can't.
And a different type of logic.
Yeah.
But surely logic has to. Well, okay, I say surely, but maybe not. But by the definitions of logic, could it not be that? Sure. Well, for me, the founding principle is just truth. That you cannot make any progression until you have a definition of truth.
Yeah.
As in, this is absolute, this is not. So this is correct, this is incorrect.
What is the best definition that you can come up with?
No, as in, it's just that truth is, as in that's what you start with, just truth. That, you can't build anything if you don't have the element of truth, because otherwise I could say 1 + 1 = 2, and say that would be true, and then I could say 1 + 2 = 5. I was like, well, how does that work? It's inconsistent. So to make any progress, you need things to be true. Whether that's the founding, for me, I would say that's the founding principle. That is the cornerstone on which everything I have is built. But you could say, is that actually the cornerstone, or is it the language? Or is it just the methodology of it? I would say it's still. I need that concept of truth, on which everything else can be built.
So
because surely you cannot. I would say you can't have any other way about that. As in, as soon as you have, if you had any founding principle other than truth, then something could be false.
Yes, but that's assuming truth is something absolute.
But by definition, is truth not absolute?
Why should it be?
Because it's truth.
By definition.
That's the thing with definitions; they can be absolutes.
Yes. I'm really trying to figure out how you can, like, some sort of principle that you can then.
But a principle by definition is built on truth, is it not?
Yes.
Well, actually, you know, I say that, but then I just had the principle of truth.
Yeah. Well, what I mean is like some sort of. For example, right now, what we have, the assumptions when we talk about math, basic addition math, is that first we have values. We start with values which are different from each other, and they either increase from each other or decrease from each other. I'm not talking about complex or anything, just normal string of numbers. Let's just say natural numbers. Yeah. So it's a 1, 2, 3. They're separate. That's the thing, and
they're all individual things, or is 2 just 2 ones?
What?
Or is 3 just 3 ones?
Well, it doesn't matter. It depends on your base.
You have 1, and then you have.
No, but that's the thing. As in, because if you said, because what did you start with?
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure
Did you always have
out.
1, 2, and 3, or did you just have 1? Because if you're saying 1, 2, and 3
are okay. So you just have 1. That's a good point. Yeah.
So but then isn't that saying that's your fundamental in math?
Well,
your fundamental value.
Yes. No, the fundamental thing is the concept of value.
Mm-hmm.
So, 1. So you have the concept of a thing.
Countability.
But why 1?
Yeah.
Why not 2?
Because you have 1.
So 1 is the fundamental value.
Yeah, exactly. So you have a value, and then you assign that to a unit, and then you add on. You either find another one, and you can add, and therefore you have a new thing, which is 2 things, and so on and whatnot. But this, however you start with this, you're going to end up with what we have today. eventually. So we have to start up from something else if we want to think of something new.
This brings up one of the other things when we were discussing about we're confined or we conform to some things. Now, on two things, what if what we find is the optimal path? By definition, the optimal path is the optimal path. So, well, should there only be one optimal path in theory? Or is it possible to have several optimal paths?
In regards to anything?
Yeah, and now you could argue against that quite simply in the case of if I said what is the optimal path from point A to B, and say it's a sphere and you're just going from antipodal points, then you could just take any path.
Yeah.
But then you could argue, are they actually different paths or are they just the same path? Now on a sphere, because it's uniform, you could say, well, that's just the same path. So.
Yes, but then we come back to the concept of value from that, which is you're trying to find differences in measurable ways.
Yeah, but
is there anything else to look at?
Well, as in that's the thing. Well, as in that was kind of the second point, that it's pragmatic, which is if it ain't broken, don't fix it. No, but so that's the thing. So if I still want to do everything from first principles, at least learn it from first principles, just so I have a thorough understanding. But like even sort of, ideally we would go through all the experiments that have occurred in the history of science. But by following the theory, at least, and reading about that, we just do it as thought experiments. Yes. And then you could argue we take it on faith that we trust the results that are cited. And say, if you were to do this, this is what you'd get. It's like, okay, yeah, that follows my intuition, blah, blah, blah. And then we get into the stuff that's on the fringe of our intuition, or like relativity and quantum mechanics. And then it says, well, if you were to do this is what you get. It's like, okay, well, I believe that. Well, as in, it's difficult.
I trust all you people.
Yeah, as in, that's the thing. There's still an element of trust. And you could say, well, isn't that non-scientific in the sense of you're not taking empirical, because surely the most reliable, no matter how much you doubt yourself, or you might doubt yourself, the most reliable conclusions you can draw are those that you draw yourself. Now, if I were to say, like if Max were to say, oh, Ali's like this, then I think, okay. No, like say Max has told me 9 things, and when I've gone to verify them myself, 9 times out of 9, they're always correct.
Yeah.
So Max has a reliable reputation. Now say this 10th time, Max says, by the way, Ali is like this, and based on the reputation, I would say, well, that's true. I would say, well, Max said it, he has a good reputation, that's true. But still, at the end of the day, I haven't made that verification myself. So what I've done is based on trust.
Yeah, so what happens is that because of the nature of us and the fact that we don't live forever, back on Thorpe Park, what happens is that we go on that trust until someday we may stumble upon something that contradicts that. And then it is a challenge to realize what it is that it is.
What was the weak link?
What was the
break
link?
chain?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that's the thing. So couldn't that be argued as unscientific?
Unscientific.
Yeah,
I think that can be argued only as scientific.
Well,
because you go on, you first like in the beginning there was a man. First you start off with we start off with certain things being told to us and certain assumptions being told to us, and then we are let loose into the world, and then we get to experiment and whatnot, and then if we find something that doesn't agree with what we have been told, then we have to figure out with what part.
That's scientific. What I meant unscientific was the whole. So say Max has a good reputation. And then on the 10th time, I think he's got a good reputation. I'm not going to check it. Surely, on principle, you should never assume.
Yes.
Pragmatically, you kind of have to.
Yeah, but okay. So we go back to this idea is that Now, what I'm saying right now, to me, it's starting to sound like we shouldn't do anything at all again. But
but we should.
Yeah, but when you have a principle, that goes against the whole thing.
What does?
Having a principle.
What does it go against?
It goes against creativity.
Does it? Well, see, this is the thing. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And this is kind of, I don't know if this is part of human condition. I get it. As soon as you have a principle, you've put a barrier in place.
Yes.
Yeah. And so say you just have an open field, say an infinite plane. And as soon as you have one principle, you think, okay, say it's an infinite plane on multiple dimensions, an infinite construct.
Go on.
And then just say you have a principle per plane.
Yeah.
And then, so first you visualize it in 3D space, that you've got this big open space in front of you. And then you put one principle of, say each principle is a plane that can be oriented in any way. And then you've got one principle, and you say, okay, everything on that side of that plane I cannot go to anymore.
Mm.
So I'm confined to this side.
Yes.
And then you come up with another principle, and it's like, okay. And then eventually you have all these principles that, let's just say it makes a nice dodecahedron or something.
System of thinking.
Yeah, and then you say, okay, well, I'm confined to this space. But then, what if those principles define your optimal situation?
But
so would you rather have creativity?
They produce your optimal situation. They don't define it.
No, but as in like that's, you know, when you have your limits in a mathematical situation, or in a physical situation, you say, well, these are the limits. When it goes to these points, it ceases to exist or it ceases to operate.
Yes.
Then that outlines where your optimal region is.
Okay, I guess what's the most practical and logical way to do this is that, okay, let's make the principles, but let's make them out of cards.
Mm-hmm.
So that they're very easily broken. In our heads, of course. We can't do that to the world. That would be interesting, though. But, yeah. And that way, we're always forced to double check something.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Because, so if maybe I'm misinterpreting. But if I were to say, by the way, when I say Max, I'm not just because you're here. And then, so say Max 9 out of 9 times has been correct once I verify.
Yes.
And then say I construct a principle based on that.
Yes.
One, this is an aside, so this is just a comment. So one, I would say that's a flawed principle because it's based on a physical thing, it's based on something which is limited. But let's say I establish that as a principle that Max is always right.
Right.
And then the 10th time he says something and he says this is also true.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't verify that myself because I've based it on principle that Max is always right. But then I might find, well, Max said this about Ali, but Ali's not actually like that.
So it shouldn't be is Max right or wrong thing. It should be in terms of, okay, so this is sort of this type of thinking is the same type of thinking that is really everywhere in science and I think other parts as well, which is you take a system, you isolate the system, and you study it in isolation, and then if necessary, you add in one by one external variables. Yeah. But sometimes we don't do that enough. So, for example, in political science, what happens is that you take an isolated system and then you try to fix one part of it, but another part breaks down because you're not seeing a big enough system. Yeah. And so it's that, but sometimes you can't see a big enough system, which is in the case of Max, you can't see the internal workings of Max. So So what happens is that the next logical step is to understand that Max himself is another system that may or may not be wrong. Regardless, the fact that you have certain amounts of times that he has been right does not warrant you to set up a principle that
that's
gives a yes
point,
or no
though.
thing.
No, that's my whole point, though. The whole ideally, everything we've been taught in physics, we would be able to test ourselves individually to have a maximized confirmation of these theories, to say that, well, like no disrespect to any of them, but at the end of the day, say, so what? It's just Einstein. So what? It's just Newton. So what? It's just, they're just people who have the potential to be just as flawed as any of us, and we have the potential to be just as flawed.
And I think they were just as flawed.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Like, in a way, they're almost deified.
Which I know that's very annoying.
It's the whole kind of and don't get me wrong. Again, like I said, I'm not trying to disrespect them or anything, but it seems to be this whole bandwagon hopping that people do, of the case of, well, if I'll move away from this, therefore I have to go to the extreme opposite, so I'm just going to jump on that bandwagon.
Yes,
and do it in moderation.
Yeah, and this all comes back to the idea of sticking with a principle, which is which part of that comes into respect for authority, which is that you assume that some other authority knows. Your principle will be that you will trust a certain authority with these certain things. For example, right now in our government, or when we trust our mothers or fathers to know the best thing to do, or...
I would say I don't have those principles. Okay. Not in a disrespectful way.
No.
The whole, if you start from scratch.
You don't, because you just said that Einstein was just a person. And obviously that transfers to other types of thinking, but in general, people do. People have a certain respect and sort of relief in the fact that there is authority.
But would you say that's innate or not? No, I would
innate
argue
in people?
As in, do you think people will automatically default to that? I would argue no, because so far, I found that I haven't defaulted to that. As in, I grew up like that, but then I started rethinking, and I was like, well, no.
No, I think it's a thing that we are born into, first of all, but I don't think that it is a default. I think
it's possible for people to change.
Yeah, because well you're here.
Well, no, exactly. No, but this is my point. So when people say, so the thing I think I said that I'm recently having to contend with, having to realise there might be a truth that people are different in their capabilities of thinking. As in, on the whole, obviously you have people with different mental abilities, but I mean, just say like the general population. Even this is iffy to say, but I'll just go with it for now. The general population. So if I consider, well, if I'm capable of coming to a decision and making this realization, so should anybody else. Now my friend said, see, he used to think like that, but then think about if someone who you deem to think irrationally, can you put yourself in their way of thinking? And my argument was, yes, I could, but then I realized that there's a flaw in this. It's just a case of how much do you step back to look at the bigger picture. So if I were just in this confined and say, okay, again, going back to say, these 9 out of 9 times Max has always been right. If I just confine it to that, Max is always right. Now, if I step back and see that 9 out of 10 times he was right, then I think Max wasn't always right. And then it's just a case of, well, I think I could, it's hard to say this for sure because I only have my own experiences. But I would argue that, well, I could see something from the point of view of someone I would deem to have a rational thought. Again, this is why I would say I can understand why so many things happen, but that doesn't mean I can justify it. I can understand why so-and-so hit so-and-so because they hit them back. I can understand why, but it doesn't mean it's justified. I would say, well, I can see what your reasoning was, but my understanding is that reasoning is flawed.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but do you think that they then should be equally able to reach your reasoning?
I would think so, because well, there are several ways of getting to that. Like, firstly, it used to be just, well, yeah, because I used to be like that, and then I would say I expanded my reasoning to be able to see, well, I was flawed. But then there's the other thing that this is more for personal comfort, so I'm iffy about it, but it works out quite nicely. Is if I have a certain way of thinking, by thinking that they cannot reach my level, so to speak, of thinking, does that not put me in a privileged place, or does that not put them in an underprivileged place? Therefore, introducing this element of superiority, which I disagree with, and I think cannot exist on a fundamental level of humans, of just creatures, living things, as in within the species. I don't think it's a case of one person can be higher or lower than the other, or one group of people can be higher or lower. It's just a case of, in our nature, we are effectively equal. Again, you get these variations of, say, if I was mentally ill, maybe I am.
But there's also variation of experience, and you can develop certain skills for yourself. For example,
those are all nurture.
Those are just what?
That's nurture.
Is it not? Is there not some nature in it as well? So I mean, can there not? Could you? Well, okay. Definite difference between males and females. Though. I mean, it's contentious, but say you could say that men.
I know I'd get a lot of stick for it, but I would say men and women are still different. As humans, we're equal, but we're still fundamentally different. As in, that's why you have males and females. To say that males equals females just seems like a logical fallacy.
But in terms of, say, the way the brain works, would you accept that could be different as well?
That is different, as in that has been. This is another way I don't get why
stuff like this, or various things about how.
So there's predispositions
and stuff like that. So but is that?
See, this is the thing. That's what I mean by it makes it difficult for me to contend with this, because my whole life I've grown up with the notion that everybody is equal, not just in terms of rights and whatnot, but at a fundamental level. And this is going to sound incredibly stupid, and I would say it is, looking back on it. It was only when I came to uni in first year, I was just talking, and then a medic said, I said, well, men and women are equal, and then the medic said, no, they're not. And I said, yes, they are. And he goes, just think about it. And then I thought, actually, this is kind of obvious, because of the whole male, female, just not even the phenotypes, but the genotypes.
Yes, but the thing is, when you say equal, when you said equal before university, what you were thinking about was in terms of how society should treat them.
But then, that's the thing, but men and women are different, as in, like, even if you just look at a physical sports competition, why do they separate men and women categories?
Yeah, because they have different physical abilities.
Exactly. So you can't. In that way, you could say, well, you shouldn't treat them the same because they're different, and to treat two different things as equal, you could argue is an injustice. Because now, if I said, oh well, Ali's 70 kilos, I don't know how much you are. I'm just saying for the record, like, say you're 70 kilos, and then I say some girl is 70 kilos. Then if I would say, well, Ali's capable of carrying this much and he hasn't asked for a break, you shouldn't either.
Okay.
But then that is an injustice. Again, this is on the presumption that from experimental observation, from evidence, an observation that men are generally capable of physical strength on the lifting front. Because as far as I'm aware, the pain endurance of women is much higher given childbirth, that's become like a common fact.
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing, because of this is the thing with the principle I had that, well, they're equal on that front. I put them equal on every front. That I'm capable of doing this, so a woman is capable of doing this. A woman's capable of doing that. I'm capable.
Yeah.
But then you could just say, can you give birth to a child? No. Well, there you go. That's one thing that sets you apart. It's like, true, but that's kind of one thing. And then it was a case of, well, now you're just denying it because you've just admitted there's a difference, but you're saying ignoring that fact is still the same.
Yeah, but we come back again to generalizing and coming out of the Boolean type of thinking, which is...
Of course, no. It's diagonally across. And it's a sliding door, and the one thing I have to get used to is the fact that it doesn't have a lock, it's just a sliding door.
Okay, I trust you not to.
Yeah, so the thing that we have to come away from is again the Boolean logic thinking, is that if they're not equal, it doesn't mean that they're... if they're equal, it doesn't mean... Sorry, if they're not equal, it doesn't mean all these other things. You know, it doesn't mean you.
No. That's the thing. Everything is within itself, and this is the other thing that when people make these jumps, it's really annoying. I'd say like when they're doing, when you say, "Oh, okay, because this isn't the case, then that must mean all of this thing." Like, there was a BBC Bite Size because I have to do these little subject knowledge stuff on my BBC, and then the biology thing it was about behaviour, and it said 10 woodlice are released into environment with mixed things, and there's half of it is light, half of it is dark, and then split across that. So half is damp and half is dry. So you've got one light dry, one light damp, one dark dry, one dark damp, and then it has the numbers of woodlice in each region, and then there's like 0, 1, 2, and 7, and then it says what would be an accurate conclusion to make from this, and it said woodlice. So most of them, I think, 9 of them were in the dark, and 1 was in the light damp region, and it said you don't find woodlice in light areas. Most woodlice prefer the dark. 70% of woodlice prefer the dark, damp condition. And that's the correct one, because that's all. It's like when someone says, "Oh, so and so likes to eat this food." What does that say about them? All it says is that they like to eat this food. Exactly. It doesn't tell you that it's not okay. Like a correlation is not causation necessarily. It doesn't tell you that. Well, they like this, so they must like that, and they probably don't like this, and they're probably on a diet or not. No, the only thing you know for sure is what you've observed. Yeah, exactly. And it really bothers me that people keep making these jumps and connections. And yes, it's natural to find these. Well, one would argue it's natural that we look for these patterns, which is understandable. But then we are beings of reason as well, so we should be able to moderate that and say, well, I would think this is where it's going, but I don't know for sure. So I'm not going to definitively say that. I'm just going to say, I saw so-and-so go into the shop. That means I saw so-and-so go into the shop. Doesn't mean they were up to this. Doesn't mean they were avoiding me or whatever. It just means that's all they did. Just accept that. That's all you know for sure. And this is one point in a several variable system that could play out anyway. You just have this one. This is the only data point you've got fixed. Make another observation, and you can start ruling out things, but you still can't definitively say it's this thing or that thing.
Alright.
So,
so here's.
So we're getting onto the whole.
Interesting.
I don't know if you could hear the conversation.
No.
Okay, it was just when people make jumps from observations and then draw out patterns from that. So, the example was, say, oh, I saw person A eating this food. What does this tell you about person A? Does it mean they like these foods? Does it mean they're on a diet? Or does it mean you saw them eating this food? Fundamentally, reductionist, I guess, the only thing you know for sure is that you saw them eating that food.
Yes.
You cannot draw anything else from it. You can take other observations and build up a model, but you won't know for sure until you directly observe that thing. And that's something that bothers me quite a bit, where people make these just connect. It's almost like the whole God and the gaps argument.
Yes.
Of, well, this fills it in quite nicely, so I'm going to do that.
But is that not what we've had from that science basically?
No, but that's the thing. So science would. So the example I explicitly gave was there's a BBC bite-sized activity in biology about behaviour, and it goes, there are 10 woodlice, 4 regions. You've got light damp, light dry, dark damp, dark dry, and the woodlice were released, and then after 10 minutes were counted in which region they were. 0 in light dry, 1 in light damp, 2 in dark dry, and 7 in dark damp. What is the most accurate conclusion you can draw from this? And A was, you won't find any woodlice in the light. B was, most woodlice prefer the dark. And C was, 70% of woodlice like the dark damp condition. And I would say C, it turns out that was what they were looking for. But that's the only conclusive thing. You can't say most based on this. You can say 70% of your sample group.
Yeah, because most is arbitrary.
Yeah, but you can't say that 70% of Well,
Yeah,
you
it
can't
says
really
70% of the group.
of the sample group.
So that's it. All it does is it reports.
But they might not prefer it. They might have. It might not be they like that condition.
Well,
it's just that you found them in that condition. They might
I think it does say 70% were in the dark down.
Yeah, okay, 70% were in the dark.
As in, all it does is it reports. Yeah, as in. Again, that might seem trivial, but all it does is report exactly what you found, which is what we're meant to do in science. That's the whole point of scientific thing. It's you report what you see. It's like, when teachers ask in an experiment or something, or what did you observe? You just say what you observed, and then they might say, what can you say from this, or what could you infer, what possibly, but you still don't know for sure. You're just trying to fill it. You're extrapolating information. So, an ideal experiment, you would get every data point across every variable to be able to rule out degeneracies or even establish which degeneracies exist. But realistically, pragmatically speaking, most experiments you can only get so many data points and extract trends from them and say, we've identified these relationships that we think they are causal, or at the very least they correlate.
Yes.
But we're saying this is causal.
But that's basically your rational opinion. That last
yeah.
bit.
So it's a rationalized opinion, but it should not be. I would argue it shouldn't be taken as absolute.
No, it's not.
No,
but that's the thing. So many people take it as absolute.
Yeah. But no, it's not absolute. No. And I think that is. What we would call science is basically the forming of theories around the data. The data is the only thing we can be sure of. And you could argue that historical data, we can't even be sure of that because we can only be sure of data that we take ourselves.
Again, which goes to the whole example of.
But then science is then trying to explain that data with theories or paradigms that seem sound. And then you come up with a thing that seems to explain the data that you've seen, and then it's falsifiable, so you can perform more tests to gather more data to see if it also seems to fit within your paradigm.
But then it's still considered it's when it's considered as absolute. That's what bothers me, because as soon as it's considered as absolute, it follows that it's considered as complete, and therefore people rule out anything else.
Yeah, I think the thing that is lacking in that causes what you're saying is I don't think we need to be more. I don't think that we need to be more careful in our language because that's just not practical. I mean, like you can. Okay, I can see. Okay, you shouldn't use absolute or whatever or stuff like that because what the hell.
I think scientifically speaking, it was the whole case of just say exactly what you have.
Yeah,
for sure.
That makes sense. And on the other hand, whenever you read a statement, you should always remember that. Yeah, right now what we do is that as you said, we are trusting a lot of our previous generations and even the people who are working right now.
Or even when you're lectured something.
Yeah, exactly.
How many of us actually go away to verify what the lecturer said was what so and so wrote or did?
Exactly. So we take a lot of that in, but at the same time we need to realize that all of that is just based on some sort of number. Especially in science. Some sort of number gathered through a certain type of method.
But not necessarily.
Why not?
Because people can introduce their own influence. So, this is what I was saying with this is why it particularly bothers me with science when it's regarded as absolutes in terms of this is the data we got and this is what we conclude about the data, and then someone comes along and says this is what it actually means in the case of.
Yeah, well, that person is just expressing a very nice opinion. That's pretty much it.
No, but not necessarily, because when they do it to further their own cause. So this goes both ways. Now, for me personally, I always experience this with the whole science-religion apparent dichotomy. So you get people that say, well, this proves this, therefore God doesn't exist. And then you get people that say, well, this proves this, which is supposedly said in our scripture, therefore God does exist. And it's like, you're just manipulating facts or twisting things. But the thing that made me properly realise this was, and last year, one of our modules, the lecturer said that, here's the main theory that everyone follows, and it doesn't explain everything, but it's the one that best explains.
It's an alarm I set to set
Okay.
up my account.
It was just very
yeah.
filling that I couldn't tell where it was coming from.
I thought it was coming outside.
Yeah, I was just like, that has never happened. Oh no.
Yeah.
But he said, here's the main theory, and it doesn't explain it doesn't explain everything. There are still holes in it that we can't explain. But with the data we do have, it explains it very nicely. As in, so you're saying there are implications from it, which we can't explain. But it does explain the data we've observed. And it's a very nice theory so far. And it seems to fit all our observations, and it's made some predictions, which so far seem to be confirmed. Other things we're still unsure about. So this is what most people go for. And then he kind of went through a few other theories. It's like, here are the two main competing theories in addition to this. And so it was kind of briefly went over those, and in the notes there's a bit about those. And then the lecturer said, but this one pretty much doesn't count because if you just think about it, it's been dismissed and everything. As a lecturer, there was a reputation, and I still think he's a great academic, bar this incident. And I thought, okay, well, this person clearly is a specialist in their field. Took their word for it, and then thought, okay, so that was one of those theories that have been discarded and dismissed. That when said data first came about, these theories were like the forerunners, and then when more data came about, they could rule that one out. So it was a case of history of science is why we're learning it. But it turns out when I went for PhD open days, that was a really active area of research, and it was still quite a competing theory. But
at the same time, there are people today who are actively researching the existence of the ether.
No, I know, but as in, like I did take that into consideration. Is this just a case of we're gonna find it out? And it was like, well, at the kind of when they put the pitch for these PhDs, they said, well, we've got this data which still supports this theory, but doesn't support that theory.
Yeah.
So there is still evidence that hasn't ruled it out and has actually given it strength. And I thought, I didn't feel like I'd been lied to. I just thought, that was a really careful, I have to be really careful with this. That, I've been aware for a few years that I would say it's a hypocrisy where people just take, the lecturer says it, and it must be truth.
No.
Because there's scientists, and because there's science, it must be right, and therefore I'm not going to question it. And I find that as a kind of double standard. I think if you can, again, the whole all or nothing, if I'm going to be critical of people who claim to be religious or people who say blah 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 about religion, as in if people say religion says this and this proves God exists, or because science, and they tie it up, I'm skeptical of that whenever people make claims like that. But if I'm skeptical about those people making that, why should I not be skeptical about scientists? As in, not in the case of doing it for the sake of it, but everyone here is still a person, so everyone is just as flawed and fallible.
It's each of our responsibility to sort of be skeptical of each other in science, especially because that's the whole point.
But that's the thing, and this is what really bothered me, the hypocrisy that I kind of observed was, they're like, well, the lecturer said it, so it must be just like, wait, but they're not even, so don't get me wrong, I really like our lecturers, but they're not even considered as the current Einstein, so they're not even, their reputation isn't even regarded as the pinnacle in that field. But you still regard it as kind of a truth, an absolute truth. But so the
which
whole
again
thing
comes down to the kind of the authority thing of then you kind of
who do you feel more comfortable giving authority?
Exactly, and then you end up
and then so that came
it comes down to treating everyone as just a person. Find someone just a person, just
effectively
people.
the only, not in a cynical way, not in an antisocial way, but fundamentally in terms of people, the only person I can definitively trust is myself. And even that I have to be iffy of, because I know I can get emotionally compromised and just think, oh gosh, and then that's why you build up relationships to normalize, and not normal in the social sense, because I don't really think that exists, but in terms of it's not normally like verifying and the word's gone, but to compare. What I'm getting at is the concept of you need to build up as in reliable relationships with reliable people, or people that you find to be critically reliable, because if you yourself are emotionally compromised at some point, they can bring you back in, because it's like
you need to set up a sounding board or something.
Yeah, that's very important, because ultimately, you can say that he was just a person, or she was just a person, or whatever. But ultimately, you have to realize that you're also a person at some point. Yeah.
Well, none of us, I think, are capable of
that
complete self-sustenance.
Yeah, nobody is.
I'd say again, we're all sort of 0.9. Not me. So to actually reach unity, you have to depend on others. But then you can't give everyone else your complete self. You can only give a fraction of yourself. And so, say we're all at 0.9, then you can't just find another person and say, hey, together we make 1.8, so we've exceeded unity, we're done. Everyone can only give a fraction of themselves. That if we all work as a society and unify, that little fraction that we all contribute to each other adds up that we do reach unity. Even if it's just unity, it's still unity, whether you're at it
it's
or
more than what we started with. So. So
but at the same time, we have to accept that we can only trust ourselves ultimately.
Ultimately you can only. But that's the thing to take. You have to take a leap of faith. Well, I would argue that you have to.
We already do.
But this is the thing, and so. And this is the thing with the whole absolutes, and so I would say, well, if we can take a leap of faith with that, then how far can we take a leap of faith? Is it a leap of faith if it's something that you know for sure? I'd say, well, no, because that's not a leap of faith. I know if I jump here, I'm going to land there, so I will do that, and I'm comfortable with doing that. But if you, again, that doesn't mean just doing it blindly, like a case of, oh, I've never met this person, but you know what? I'm just gonna go with it.
I think leap of faith for me at least, is where I cannot practically confirm something for myself, and I prefer to work as just some sort of psychological effects. For example, I'm studying physics because of some psychological reasons that I've had during my life. And then I decided to take a leap of faith because I want to contribute to physics and not only study it, because I feel like I need to, contribute the money that, for example, my parents are giving me, or something, So ultimately, what I have to do is that practically I have to take a leap of faith, because, as I said, I can't go away and study everything that has been. So what I have to do is I have to start off from, I don't start from one point, I don't start from 1 year, I start from several different parts, and I try to link them, and I try to see something that makes sense to me. I try to see a logical sort of web, although it's technically...
Which already introduces bias, because
No, but I'm talking about physics.
But I don't mean that in Florida, but when you said you start off at several different places and you try to link them together. You could... I'm just saying this as a side note. You could argue that isn't that confining your approach and stopping the creativity because you're trying to relate it to each other.
Well, right. So the point is that yes, I am confining creativity in a way, but I am also left with no other option so far.
Exactly.
So I have to first be able to have tools to think. And the tools to think, for me, tools to think, I already have my brain. What I mean is that I have to have things to think about. And I'm gathering the things to think about. It doesn't mean that I accept them. It just means that I can see the reasoning that led to them. Like you said, you can see the reasoning when somebody who you believe to be irrational does something. But it doesn't mean that it's right. So, Anyway, a nice little thing to think about is, it's just completely off topic, but what if our neurons traveled at the speed of light? What would we observe differently?
Sorry, what, our neurons travelled, or the signal between neurons?
It's the same thing, isn't it?
No, the neurons are the cells, but they send impulses.
Yeah, the impulses, sorry, not the actual neurons.
Right, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So,
first
in
of all,
terms of the implications,
yes,
our processing
the
would be
implications.
much higher.
Yeah, and the other thing is, would time practically stop? Would be completely trapped in our bodies because our bodies don't move fast.
Well, if it's just the neurons, then no, because our perception would be incredibly heightened.
Yeah.
But then you could say one. Obviously, I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I know.
But then you could argue that if only our neurons travelled at the speed of light, then the rest of, like, me seeing you isn't happening at the speed of light because of the medium of air.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some slowed down. So in my mind, there's lag from reality, so to speak.
Well, the point is that you can't react to that lag. So it's an ever existing lag, which
exactly. So there would always be these. Well, would there always be these pockets of nothing, like no stimulus in my mind? That my mind is still conscious and thinking, and then so I'm thinking at the speed of light, whatever that means. But in terms of my relation to the physical realm, what's going on?
Right. So
I think we receive a nigh on infinite amount of information about the world around us anyway. I mean, our senses we sense an infinite amount of existence, but we can't process it all anyway.
Yeah.
And I think we would probably be able to process a lot more about any individual moment, but it would still be an individual moment, and it would still be finite, and there would still be more data that we could collect about it. So we'd probably have a much greater perception of what's going on around us, all around us, and have a much,
yeah, and so
heightened senses, catching flies and chopsticks.
Yeah. So say like I
think time would still progress at pretty much the same rate. We'd just be a lot more aware of what's going on in any.
But then we measure it slower.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So if I had a button right now, and we're living in the way that we're living right now, and I pressed the button, and like the three of us had the speeded up neurons, impulses, would we find, first of all, the difference in the perception of time? Because
it would be like the slow-mo guy videos, basically.
Whatever.
I would say. Well, because you can see so it's like if I drop a pebble in a puddle, and I see the ripples that I perceive it as a certain resolution of a temporal resolution. Whereas if I have a heightened senses, then I could process the data in a more precise manner that my temporal resolution has increased. So, because this is the whole.
So you'd be aware of. For example, they say that our frame rate for our eyes is a certain amount, right? It's like 15 or.
I don't know what it is.
So that if we would be able to process faster than that. Now the question is that, first of all, is the frame rate confined to our eyes, or is it confined to our processing power?
That's I don't know.
Yeah, so
I think it must be the processing power, because the eye is just
it's
just an open.
Yeah, it's like a lens, so
you should be able to get an information.
Right. So
it's just continuous.
yeah. So what I'm asking is that would we suddenly feel trapped as if inside a extremely slow body?
Possibly.
So if I wanted to say like hi, I would have thought hi like a long time ago in my sense.
I would say the temporal sense would slow, as in our perception of time would be that time has slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a whole thing that when you get to about 25, it was 20ish, they say that's your peak age, and then typically they found the younger you are, the faster you count time. So they just got a bunch of people to count to 60. And then those who are, the younger you are, the faster you count it. 20 to 25ish was sort of the accurate where people matched up with what we define to be 60 seconds. And then when you go beyond that, people slowed down. But then there was also recently saying the smaller an animal, like flies, their perception of time is, I think, faster.
Because their brains are smaller.
I can't remember, but it was like size is related to the rate that you perceive time.
Okay, makes sense.
Well, yeah, so that's the thing, because
But yeah, it makes sense that their brains are accordingly small or big.
But as in, that's the thing, is it because they're smaller or big, or is it because, is it smaller but it has to process faster because it's smaller? Because again, is that a case of it's the size or the processing? Because if you're saying, because if they were saying the smaller you are, the faster you perceive time.
Well, the point is that if I'm getting one signal, which is like a flash of light, okay, and that flash of light comes into my eyes, it's a piece of information. That information has to get converted from my eye sensors to the bit that I realize, which I have no idea what that is. But now that is a certain distance which this impulse has to travel. Now if we miniaturize that, then technically I would realize that faster. Yeah. So that's.
So it could just be a simple case of.
Yeah, but then again, you hear these things that like, I don't know, dinosaurs had not so large brains or something like that.
But then dinosaurs were larger, so you could still say there was a long way for it to go.
Yes.
Well, okay, actually no. I think most dinosaurs were the size of like a dog.
Damn it.
Okay,
ruined my chance.
No, there are so many. No. See, this was a recent thing. There's obviously a lot of variety.
Yeah.
But
like
I think
in terms
the
of
average.
Most animals are insects or something.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it was like in terms of the average, in terms of all the types of dinosaurs, on average, most of them are about the size of a dog, or as in smaller than a human.
Smaller than a human.
I used to think dinosaurs were as big as they were in Jurassic Park. like the brachiosaur.
Yeah, and also they can operate doors. And talk.
But yeah, no, like the brachiosaur in Jurassic Park, that's how I used to think dinosaurs were that big.
Yeah.
And then the actual brachiosaur skeletons are about 25 meters high, which is still tall, but not as tall as it was in the film.
Yeah, they were like.
And then the other thing about the film, which really annoyed me right at the start, when they find the velociraptor skeleton, and it goes, no, the word raptor itself means bird of prey. It's like, it doesn't. Raptor means thief, veloci means fast, speedy thief. I was like, that was just a blatant disregard for the actual thing. Like,
oh god.
I know you have artistic
license and all, but that really bothered me. Yeah. Another thing that really bothered me was, have you seen the movie Fly? The Fly.
No, I still haven't seen that with Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, it's the whole idea is that he makes a teleporter.
Yeah, and he accidentally.
He goes in and a fly comes in with it, and then he turns the DNA gets mixed up somehow. Somehow the fly doesn't end up in their skin or something. But it's a little bit weird because first of all, what about all the air?
Well, that's the thing. It's our creative license.
Or like the chair or. All this stuff.
Or even individual parts of your body, like why would your arm end up as your arm?
Yeah, if you can't distinguish between the fly and
the chair and arm, you could argue potentially by saying it could have been filtered out. That could have been, because effectively it's like you know how you separate vocals from a track.
Yeah.
If you can either get an a cappella version, you can either extract the voice from the track, or more commonly, if you get an instrumental version, you get that sound wave, invert it, and then place it over the original one, because that will just cancel out the music, and you're left with it. So you could argue that there was nothing in there. He got the machine to read as a no object, so no person or chair.
So with him, no object.
So as in, it was just air on the chair, and you could say, scan this, don't teleport it, just scan it. From now on, filter that out.
Yes.
So don't pick that up.
Yeah, exactly.
So that could be done.
That could be
done. Said, why does it not just...
Yeah. So this brings me back to this whole idea of teleportation. And if, one day we manage that... It's a bit scary. Yeah. Because if you think the principle would be that you would go into a chamber of sorts, you would get scanned, your configuration would be memorized, and then that configuration would be, utilized to manufacture another one, assuming that everything is within limits.
Mm-hmm.
And then that should technically move and act like you because the system's set up like you are. Right? Cool. But the point is that you won't have to destroy the first one.
Have you seen The Prestige?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's a damn, See, this is where I was a little iffy. I would use a teleporter. Okay, I would. And I know the thing, this problem. I know
the
this
question
problem.
is now: is it a teleporter or is it a cloning device?
Technically it's a cloning device as long as the process doesn't need to destroy the original to get an accurate read.
And it teleports 2 in 1.
Yeah. So, for example, in there were versions in Star Trek where they wanted to teleport someone and they locked on to them and they filtered out certain things and they brought on another version of them.
Okay, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I remember the episode where they had Scotty.
Yeah.
And he's been suspended in a transporter beam for how many decades?
Yeah. And there's another one where in the Next Generation you've got one of the doctors who gets a genetic disease, and what they do is that they bring back an earlier version of her, which is like, well, she died. You killed her, and then you just brought a better copy. And when I think of it in terms of a society, I'm okay with that. That works. Okay, that works, and for all intents and purposes, the new person is the old person. Right?
Physiologically, at least.
Leaving out all, arguments of religion or soul or something
well,
like that.
Just like consciousness, but as in, that's the thing, if I, physically copied your neural system, central nervous system, and pasted it into a new body, as in your identical body, would I still get you? Because I think that would be one of the tests for determinism. But then you could argue exactly how fine-tuned is determinism.
Yeah, how fine-tuned we are.
Yeah, as in that's the thing, because if I copied your body there, and then just pasted you 1 meter to the side, if you were significantly different, I would say that could be a case for determinism, and it's just solely because all the effects of you being 1 meter to the side is so dependent on everything else. It's determined by everything else. There's that, but then, or would you just become a brain dead copy?
So that's a good question. And the thing is, even if I do become a brain dead copy, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that we need to do more work, for example. And of course, at some point, we need to stop.
It could mean something.
Of course. It's the same thing with ether,
there may be an impossible limit. I mean, I'd imagine that we're incredibly complex.
Yeah, let's talk about a block of diamond. We don't need to talk about,
Well, a block of diamond, I would say, is quite.
Yeah, but
it's quite simple.
It's the same thing, is it not? Is it not?
Well, no, because we are. A diamond is just a crystalline structure. I say but as in, I appreciate it and all this.
Yeah.
But it's
quite
relatively
stable,
simple. It's monatomic, and it's just a simple structure.
Plant.
See, this is the thing. As soon as you get to living things, that makes the difference because, or even was it
artificial life stuff?
No, I can't remember if it was Watchmen. It was just saying that to replicate a bomb is not possible. It was that or Doctor Who or Star Trek or something. They were saying that anything with Terminator.
Yeah.
That's it. They can't send
people.
They could send people back in time. They can't send guns because they're complicated, like bombs and things, because they're moving parts. They could somehow send a whole robot back.
All of them. Yeah, right.
But they couldn't send back. I think it was Terminator that said that. Just because the whole.
Yeah, you can't send, and they can't be sent back in their clothes. No.
Yeah, because it was inorganic material. Because the cyborg. Again, this was a whole. Well, you could argue that maybe it's just what they're exposed to. So if it was a cyborg,
they're all super, hot bodybuilders that are being sent back.
That's the thing. Because you could say, well, if it was a cyborg, the outside was organic tissue, so that can, for some reason, survive time travel. That ends with a big ball of electricity. But hey.
All right. Back to teleporting diamond versus.
You could say a dead object.
Yeah.
No disrespect, but a dead object is just a dead. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could argue it's just an object that whether it's I say no disrespect because effectively you could include corpses into that. But let's just say, like, you know, like diamond, for all intents and purposes, that's a relatively, you could argue that's a simple molecule to make up.
Yeah.
Because it's
Because
just
you can
carbon and a
manufacture it.
crystalline. Well, yeah, it's just carbon in a crystalline structure.
Yeah.
In a certain crystalline structure that you could say, well, that shouldn't really be too hard to make up. Just give me a load of carbon and I'll put it in the structure for you.
Well, and I think it comes, again, it's stability as well. So if you move one carbon atom in a diamond lattice slightly, it's still going to remain a diamond and it's probably going to return to that state anyway.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have a very high sensitivity to small changes.
Yeah. So,
but I think that we, or any kind of complex structure with non-linear elements in its behaviour, is going to start having very sensitive dependence on initial conditions to the point that a change
in our DNA,
even smaller than the limits that we can accurately get our teleport machine working, as changes on distance scales smaller than we can possibly imagine can have ridiculous effects on the total outcome.
Well, you can see that in medicine anyway. You can see that in medicine, just not in terms of the physical structure changing, but if you just take a certain drug which suppresses one thing, that could cause all the other things to blow out of proportion.
Yeah, but just in terms of, okay, so there are two things that will get messed up probably in a teleportation. One is, first of all, the relative position of everything that you've scanned. Secondly, the existence of them. So you might... so you transport like carbon and you might get like, I don't know, like arsenic instead. Or some, I don't know. If you're programming it in terms of in
Python.
How would you do that anyway?
Well, you would just say that you've got...
How would you teleport a molecule? Because atoms you can, you can imagine that.
But the thing is, are you actually teleporting? Or are you deconstructing and reconstructing?
The point is that is there a measurable difference?
Well, you see, that's the thing. So, no, but if you're teleporting, you're actually physically moving it from one space to another.
Oh no, you're not. Because
okay, so you're just chemically deconstructing, which is alchemy. In that case. I guess
atomically rather than chemically.
Yeah, so say you're just reconstructing. Say we had the technology that could reconstruct atoms.
Reconstruct atoms, so like you could make a gold atom.
Yeah, so you could just
you would give it carbon and some energy, and it would give you gold, for example.
Yeah, as in say you just had a bank of your printer is running low on protons.
Yeah.
Can you put that cartridge in?
My printer is running low on biological matter.
Well, yeah, no, as in say no, but just on a fundamental level. So you just had protons, neutrons, and electrons, and I know there's a whole but let's say they're just purely particle for now, and then you just have your cartridges of those things. Okay, make it in this way, and then I don't know if I'm gonna try and visualize that. You could say it's almost like a 3D printer, and it's like put this layer down, and that layer, and that layer, and that layer. Okay.
How are you gonna hold that in its configuration?
I think it would have to be something altogether. It won't have to. It can't.
Okay, but we're not like. I was just saying
all at the same time. It would have to
same time I guess within a few nanoseconds.
But then you could say that could be possible in a sense, because if you said now, using the principles of degeneracy, now I know we do get degeneracy, but with the whole, if you had an absolute reference system for the universe, every electron has a unique signature in a way, if measured from one point, because you would effectively say they all have the same energy, but then if you were able to measure the spins, the position, and the intensity from just an inverse square law, each electron. Okay, now I'm iffy about this because electrons are meant to be indistinguishable.
Yeah.
But
So
from the Pauli exclusion
you
principle.
can't pinpoint one.
But then from the Pauli exclusion principle, no fermions are the same.
Yes, but it's not no in the universe.
No. That was because this is what kind of really I was like. Well, so in an isolated system I can understand that, but then by extension that should apply on a grand scale system. And the guy I asked said, yeah, effectively that's it. I said, but that's it. And then he goes, but then it's just position, isn't it? It's just the position's different, so you're like, oh, okay, sorted.
Yeah.
So, but if you, as in you could, okay, well, we'll go back a bit, but say you could just make, okay, so now you know the whole atomic makeup of what you're trying to transport or teleport. Then it could be a case of, well, the printer works out, the program works out, I'm saying it's a program, the program works out the best configuration in which to construct this thing, and it's like, okay, and I've got super fast lasers to
keep
everything in place, move things around, guide them through. Zoom, done. So you could say it's possible. Well, let's say technologically it's possible in terms of the logistics of teleporting matter. But, so is the argument now
whether it live?
Could you reconstruct it? Yeah.
I think
have you seen Deja Vu?
You with Denzel Washington?
Yeah, it's a bit iffy.
Yeah, it's a weird. I didn't really. First of all, it was like 2009 or something.
Yeah. But then also the science, But like, I know this is I know what they're talking about, but it still doesn't even hold for flimsy. But as in the one thing they did do. Do you mind if I say one of the things they do?
It's alright.
Okay, yeah. Well, there is an element of time travel, and when they send Denzel Washington back in time, they say, "Oh, not because he's being teleported." They just say because of the electric, the field or whatever. Your heart's gonna stop when you go back. So he writes some like Tipex or something, revive me, and he gets teleported to a hospital bed. So he gets teleported to a hospital bed, and then when they're like, who is he? Let's try and ID him, and then they open the show. It's like, revive me. So they administer
something.
Clear. What is that? Defib. Yeah. They do that to him. So you could say, well, everything's in place.
You just have to start it up.
Yeah, resuscitate.
But if you can teleport moving objects, then you won't have to, right?
It depends because. Oh well, okay. Now this is going on to the whole technology of.
And you're also going out to the conservation of momentum. You're transferring.
Yeah, you're transferring momentum.
You're transferring. Well, technically you can because if you read an atom, moving in that way, then you can create an atom here that moves that way. That you push it.
You can't take an atom from one place moving.
No, but you're not taking it. You're just recording it. And then you're shooting another one.
And its momentum at the same time.
Well, within the limits of the Heisenberg uncertainty, and hopefully that's enough. Hopefully,
So we're gonna give it some position within a range.
Yeah, but that range won't be that big. The principle
on an individual scale, but then it's all combining into a working system.
Yeah, but
you go back to QPM.
Yeah, but it stacks up. But all of their what I'm assuming is that all the local area around each atom, which you take, will not be larger than one or maybe two atoms. So what happens is that you might have two atoms that are, instead of being at this distance, will be at this distance together when you put them out, but due to the forces within them, they will return to the state that... Yeah.
It is... Very, very simple systems can have very chaotic
Yeah, but the thing is... So simple systems, and you come back whether we are made up of all these tiny little simple systems. We are a complex system as a whole when we think of it practically. But are we a complex system on an atomic level?
Whoa, what do you mean by that? On an atomic level, everything's the same.
Well, yeah, so what I'm saying is that if you can transfer a diamond molecule,
in theory, if you can just do one, then in theory
you can do the whole thing.
It goes to the
but
logistics.
I don't think it would be the same functional whole.
You would think you'd have some massive displaced places.
I think in terms of, I don't think my memories would be there.
Really, you think that big, like within, I don't know, like micrometers or something? Because I'm assuming.
Yeah.
You think You think you'd have an error of micrometers?
Yeah, no, that is.
I mean, you're looking at kind of, again, very, very sensitive dependence upon. Yes.
Like a lobotomy, you can't just take out a bit of the, or as in you take out a significant portion of the brain, but that doesn't have the direct effects. That doesn't, in most cases, as far as I'm aware, that solely doesn't have the direct.
Yeah, it has a lot more side effects. Yeah. So, but the thing is that what I'm assuming this will be more accurate than, anything like that. It would be something. The effect that it would have on you would be like, I don't know, if on the brain at least, would be something like if you banged your head on the wall or something.
That can go really bad.
Well, yeah, not too hard.
So, as in basically, you're saying it's a perfect replica.
It's a replica with an acceptable limit.
An experiment. Yeah. Okay. So the first thing would, as you said, would you be alive?
Yeah.
And that depends on the process, I guess.
Yes. And I'm thinking if you can. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about the body. The body is, if we look at it like a machine, we have, for example, a heart.
It's just a system.
Which blood flow both causes it to move, to pump, and also it is the thing that it pumps, right? It's something like that. What causes the heart to pump?
It's the electric.
It's the electric impulses
you've got you've got like the bundle of Purkinje. So you get electrical impulses from the. So the brain gives the heart electrical impulses to say pump, and the heart gives the brain blood.
How are those electrical impulses sent?
Through neural pathways.
Yes, which work on the basis of moving ions.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you have the moving ions moving, and then you can transfer that within an accuracy of acceptable limits. Okay, so given that it is no physical or massive practical constraints that will prevent this type of thing, which, I'm just speculating here. But if possible, then you can replicate a person who's living and breathing as they were. Because the signals that were going in this body are also going in that body, and I'm assuming the scan's much faster than any function that goes on within the body. So the body's functions from the scan's perspective are stationary. And that's the problem, because you'll have to, in order to read motion, you'll have to take two different time frames, and then you'll have to extrapolate where those are going. But on the other hand, wherever when any motion that's going through our body is going through preset routes, right? Like we've got our blood going through our veins.
Your machine needs to be independent of preset route.
What? No, the body. So the machine will be independent of the preset routes, but the fact is, when it reads, I guess the first or second read or something like that will read the non-moving parts of the body. Like, for example, it won't read the neural impulses. It won't read the. So
you could say it just reads the physical, and it just reads the masses.
Yes.
So you could do one scan reads the masses, the second does the electrical field.
Yes, and then like the blood flow and these things, and then you transfer.
So one's a static scan, one's a dynamic scan.
Exactly, yeah. So the dynamic scan would give you life, and the static scan will give you the
body.
Yeah, the place to be. And that should work.
But see, because this is the thing, now when the body stops. Oh no, but that's due to oxygen deprivation. Because I was going to say, you can't just simply put an electrical pulse through a body again, and it'll
and
be
get
alive.
it started, yeah.
But even then, that's the point, actually, because someone could have been, their heart stopped pumping for a minute, and
they can get brought
you
back.
can, but then there are cases where it can't because of how sensitive the body is to these changes.
So I mean, finally, assuming that there are no the technological quirks can be figured out, stuff like this, then the final question is that, would you use it?
Wait, is that including that you're still alive? Are we presuming that it works?
Yeah, we're presuming that the resulting creature would be in an experimentally, in a close, would be for all intents and purposes the same one that was scanned, and
so still alive, same
and
memories,
it would be a continuation of that. But of course, we know the process through which this has happened.
But does the original have to die?
Yeah, what happens?
What happens to the original? That depends on the type of scan you're doing.
If the original has to die, then I don't think I would.
No.
Because I would still count that
as death.
A death. Even if you could argue, but it's your own death and you're still alive, so how can you have died?
So yeah, where's your identity?
Yeah, well...
I wouldn't do it for that reason. That I would think that it would...
mess up with... It's like copying a copy and a copy and a copy, and eventually
I think it would dilute my identity.
Yeah, on a personal level, I think if I went into it with the knowledge that me going in, for all intents and purposes, is the same as me going out, but physically, well, I would say, for all intents and purposes, I'm not the same person coming out. And if I knew that I had to die, one, I wouldn't be comfortable with that. Not with the fact that it's me dying, but that there is death occurring unnecessarily. No, not saying that death has to occur.
You're also creating life.
Yeah, but that you can't argue. Well, I would say you can't just argue. It's like, well,
it's not.
We had this baby by killing the people who used to live
there. It's not that you're not taking the right of an individual and giving it.
But
to
then
another.
you could argue that once you come out of the machine, were you the person that went in?
Yes. Based on memories and experiences.
Say you go into the machine, it scans you, and whilst it's building the new you get a cut.
What do you mean?
So say I go into teleport
during
machine,
the scan?
And then no, say it scans me, and say it's not an instantaneous boop boop, and then so I go in A, get scanned, and then say the machine works by B creating, and then once creation is verified, A gets destroyed. So don't get rid of the source copy before you confirm that the copy as well. And then say A, so whilst B is being built, so A's already been scanned, B is being built, created, produced. A gets a scar, a cut or a scar. Then if you were to compare the two bodies,
you would see a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would still see a difference.
But then A was still conscious. But A was still conscious before B came into being.
Yes.
And therefore there is a discrepancy.
Yes.
It's like in the Prestige.
He's
still
exactly.
alive.
There's a problem. That's the problem. The problem is that if you don't have to destroy the original, then you shouldn't.
No. But that's...
Then you don't have the teleporter. Well, you technically have a teleporter. Okay,
yeah,
so let's say something else. Let's say that you don't use the teleporter because obviously you can't use the teleporter to travel. What you can do is you can create a copy of yourself at a distant location and then just kill yourself, basically. But say it creates a copy of yourself and it doesn't destroy you. Would you still use it?
No. Because that is a slippery slope, I would say. Because then how do you regulate how many U's there are? And if there are several U's, are they actually you? Because from the point of inception, they're different.
And who has,
who is
each
the
would
true
perceive itself as a different part. I mean, like I say, I think it would dilute my identity.
You think it would okay, so this
I
is
think it
another
would dilute
thing.
my identity either way, whether I, you killed A and just kept B, or if A and B are both there.
Yeah, and that's
well, there's a whole psychological thing of even when people get facial reconstruction, that is such a psychological hurdle to get over. From what I've heard.
So
no, I object on a moral level, I think. And in terms of world resources as well. I mean,
but what if you could keep producing yourself and you are a source of biomass and biofuels?
Oh God,
I don't agree with that.
I've seen Cloud Atlas.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Go on.
No,
I just.
Comes down to your sort of part of the question of would you solve the world's energy crisis if you could just take yourself out of the world?
No, but the thing is, you have to remember that this process is not. It's probably not energy efficient, as in it won't give out more energy in terms of mass as it took in, because
you said
you're
with
reconstructing.
NASA's replicating thing.
Yeah.
Because the thing that always got me with Star Trek replicators is like, can't you just keep replicating batteries?
Yeah. It has to use more power than
it puts out.
Yeah. So, for example, if it constructs a battery, the amount of power that it goes to put the battery together and create the potential difference.
Yeah, you can never put the battery into the original machine. And
yes, exactly. So you might be able to use
decrease
it for longer.
The gradient of energy depletion,
but you can't keep using it and making batteries and assuming you're going to be using it for more, as opposed to just making whatever you want without batteries. I think.
Yeah, no, well, it's just thermodynamics.
Yeah, it is. Hopefully.
If it was a teleporter that actually physically teleported,
like through wormhole generation or something.
Yeah, I would be fine with that. Yeah, I presume I'd be fine. Who knows? It could be a harrowing process. In which case, I might not be fine. But if it was a case of
what
like
would the
Portal,
process be?
Say it was just Portal, and it somehow. So Nightcrawler from X-Men, when he teleports, and there's always a bluish gas.
Yeah.
That's because he travels through other dimensions, and then the atmosphere from that dimension is the blue gas. So he actually goes through other planes of existence, other dimensions. That's what he's actually teleporting.
That's an incredible backstory.
Yeah, so it's just opening, or even like his Dark Materials trilogy.
Good point. Yeah.
Like the subtle knife is just cutting dimensions across and then going back. So you're just taking an alternative route from A to B.
Okay.
That's not measurable. Oh, chemistry. Hash's law. You've got A to B, A to C. Okay, I can't actually remember. But if you can get through a reaction, if A to B and B to C is the same as A to C, so if I want to get from A to C, I could actually be going from A to B and B to C. But for all intents and purposes, you just see A to C. So that could be how the teleporter works. That I'm getting from this point to that point, and I actually just go through event horizons, and they talk about wormholes.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the quickest route from A to B? And there's like a straight line, and then you go like that, and he goes, no. The quickest route from A to B is no distance at all. Yeah. And this is what the event horizon does, and it bends space. The ship's called the event horizon. And the engine bends space, and then you just prick a hole through it, and then it's like, it's a wormhole. And then in Deja Vu, to make it sound cleverer, they call it by its formal name, which is an Einstein-Rosenkrantz bridge.
Yeah.
Which is just a wormhole.
So, what was I going to say?
So if that was how the teleport worked, I would...
what if it doesn't work like that? So, we've got two extremes. One is that you get completely destroyed, and then, you can copy yourself, okay? And the other extreme is this, that you can actually travel faster than light.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, what if the middle, which is, it scans you, and then it uses your biomass, and then it puts it there? Or it scans you, uses your biomass, takes your biomass, somehow sends
So it's still actual teleporting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically
There's still terrible.
It
That's
takes your
just
biomass and moves your biomass. That's just
Yes,
you
but
moving from one place to
for
another,
example, you can move underwater or you can move into.
Oh yeah, in terms of
space.
that, I have no
Yeah.
problem. My problem would be with the whole if I had to be destroyed, or not only just not me.
Yeah.
If the source had to be destroyed and effectively killed, that's where I have a problem.
But it would be killed in this case, because you're scanning this creature, and then you're disassembling it, and then you're reassembling it with the same stuff.
Okay, yeah. If there's a point of
I thought you were just saying as an
disassemble all your
extract
atoms and send all the atoms separately and then reconstruct the atoms
Yeah.
at the other end. No, I would.
You wouldn't do that.
I'm not sure. I might be okay with that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, how could I confirm that? Because I can't just say, well,
It's like the
let's
prestige
test
problem.
it. Someone else can test it, and then I'll do it.
Yeah, you test it on diamonds, and you test it on
No, but that's a different
lions
thing.
and
Though,
tigers
it's
and
living.
bears.
Oh, but I don't agree with that.
Which one?
With the sending
Oh no,
the
I was
animals
kidding.
on.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, you can do it with complex systems that you manufacture. You can do it with manufactured meat.
Yeah, so if it wasn't cloning, if it was transporting, I'd be okay. I think I think in theory, I'm not saying in principle for now. If it was so case A was clone and teleport, then destroy source, no.
Yeah.
If C, which is just transport physically, the actual thing, no deconstruct, just moves physically
you close your eyes
through
and you
space.
open it and you're somewhere else.
Yeah, as in you physically move through space, as you are, fine with that.
Yeah.
And if it's B, if I said the last one, we'll see. If it's B, that you disintegrate and reassemble, but you haven't been cloned or anything.
It's the same stuff.
Then if it's you, I think I'd be okay with that because if it's actually you, so if it's just a case of
we have certain ownership of the stuff that we're made of.
It's like if I had say I made something out of Lego, and then said, look, I'm going to transport it there, and then what I did is I made a copy of the Lego model and then disassembled it. That's what I'm saying I wouldn't be okay with.
But what if you had no possible way of distinguishing between the two? It's the same thing with two electrons.
But there's perception. And this is the thing, it's observation. This is where the human condition comes in.
Yes.
It's because like in Community in the first episode, he goes, you know what separates humans? Is that we attach meanings to things. And he goes, if I told you this pencil was called Steve, and then he just snaps it, and he goes, you feel something, he goes, you feel something because we give it meaning. Then that's the thing, as humans,
I'm sure like Hitler had a very similar argument.
What?
I'm sure like Hitler had a very similar argument. We're just giving meaning to these people. But I know.
It's kind of the opposite. So I think as humans, and then that's where you could argue, I would say that's where it could be argued, just because we're humans and we give meaning, does that mean it's justified? Is that a valid enough reason to say, okay, we shouldn't do this anymore? And that gets them to the point where I'd say we should call it quits fairly soon. But you could say that gets to the whole point of, what I was saying about science and so physics and metaphysics, that each has their own scope. Now, I could completely do advances on a scientific level, paying no attention to what we define as the morals and ethics of it. And you could say it's great scientific progress was made. Well, that's the thing, you could say great scientific progress was made, but then some people could argue, well, at what cost? And then you could say, from a purely scientific point of view, as in just the whole, just doing it for the sake of knowledge and finding out, well, it's arguable if that's what science is. But you could say, well, at no cost at all. Like, well, you killed loads of people. It's like, well, it was for science. You could effectively just say that. You said
science.
It was, you could say it was just part of the sample, as in that was a failed experiment. Yes, well, that might work.
There's this idea that we should, all of us, we should have studied we still have time, but you should have studied a moral module of some sort.
I was considering philosophy, but then I thought
I mean, mandatory. Our degrees, or all science degrees, or all degrees should include something on those lines, which certain countries do. Like they have religion studies, which they take to be moral
But then
studies.
this could kind of also be a case of bureaucracy, because it's a case of. Again, this is the thing. It's a case of these are things that I think we should have done anyway, intrinsically, without someone telling us to. When I say intrinsically, I don't mean on the actual fundamental deep level. I just mean it's a case of, like if you don't know something, both of you go out and learn
and you learn it, yes.
Rather than it's a case of rather than someone having to tell you, you should probably look into this. It's not, because again, and this is probably something I get a lot of stick for. I would say, now if you define yourself, if you think you are a true physicist, that means you problem solve on a physical level, on a scientific, with the experimental level, on an empirical level, you should problem solve. But I would say that's what critical thinking applies to both metaphysics and physics. So if you're a critical thinker, you should be trying to solve problems and trying to find things out. It shouldn't be a case of, I'm only doing this because it's for my degree.
No.
And that's what kind of bothers me when you get people that, I can say, that person I'm pretty sure is a physicist because they just go around. They saw a problem though, they saw something they didn't get, now they're trying to figure it out. Whereas that person's like, oh no, I don't need to know, it's not coming up in the test. It's like, well, what's the point in doing the degree? It's like, well, I like physics. Like, well, if you actually like physics, again, and this is very iffy because you're telling people what they should and shouldn't do. But I would say by definition then, well, for me it's easier to do that with Muslims. Again, not in a passing not on anyone. Yeah. Just the whole case of, if someone says they're a Muslim, I say, well, what does that actually mean? It's like, well, you follow Islam and beliefs. Like, so that means, so say someone says someone's lying, they say they're Muslim. I'm not going to say they're not Muslim because it's not my place to judge, and I don't know whatever their reasoning is, and people make mistakes. But that's the thing. I could say, well, why are you okay with lying? It's like, well, what are you getting? It's like, well, you say you're a Muslim. What does that mean? The definition of it. What are the implications of it? What are the definitions of it? What are the implications of it? And one of those would be you don't lie. So that's not to say you're not a Muslim, but it's just saying what you're doing is very un-Islamic. So if you're going to say you're a Muslim, then it's not a case of, it's like when people say, well, I was born into Islam and I believe in God and that Muhammad is his last messenger. But all of that implies something, because if you're saying you believe in God and that Muhammad is his messenger, then you're implying that God has sent a message and his messenger has delivered that message. So what would that message be? And one of the things it includes is not lying. So it's not just enough to say, well, I would argue it's not enough to say, again, it's different for everyone. And I would say you can't pass judgment on someone, you don't know what someone's going through. But, if someone says, I'm a Muslim, but I'm okay with lying, I would think that's a contradiction. As in, I'm not saying you're not a Muslim, but how can you be a Muslim but be okay with lying? It's like if a physicist says...
It's a matter of agreeing upon what definition we have of certain principles.
Well, but that's the thing, like if someone says, oh, I'm a physicist, so it's just like, oh, what defines you as a physicist? Well, I've got this physics degree. It's like, well, what are you going to do about that problem? Well, I don't know, I never got tested on that. It's not, what about it? It's like, does it not even interest you in the slightest? And it's like, not really. But I'm still a physicist, and that, again, it's, as you said, definitions, but... Let's say,
it might also be that another problem comes up that he gets particularly interested in, and actually different problems are going to interest different people. So there might be some people that are really interested in
fundamental physicist. Again, this is the thing, this goes on the definition. So what do you see? It's like, for me, I would say a physicist. This is probably not a holistic or comprehensive definition, but I would say physicist is a problem solver. Now, that doesn't mean they can do it in all aspects of life or everything. It's like, my marriage, what do I do? physicist. No, because it's a physicist, it's physical problems.
Spherical house in a vacuum.
Yeah. So it would be a case of, and then again, that doesn't mean you have to like every problem and feel you have to solve it, but you would be able, or you would not only be able to, but you could have a go at it, and you could say, this is my approach, as opposed to, let me see what my exam technique was. It's like, okay, I'm not familiar with this, but a physicist should be able to look at a problem and and analyze it and say, these are the approaches. That is what a good physicist, I would say, can do. That you can say, here's a problem. Or it's like, oh, blah blah blah, this is a situation. Physicists first can identify what the problem is, cut out all the irrelevant knowledge, and only deal with what they need. Say, okay, well, these are our variables, these are the things that our problem is dependent on. These are the things we can change. This is my approach. This is the motivation behind my approach. This is the theory behind it and why I think this is the best approach. Let's test it out. That would be a solution to a problem. It might not work, but the whole thinking was there, as opposed to, here's a situation, well, I'm not really familiar with this. Let me consult my textbook and the exam answer scheme.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, but I would say that the physicist also has an element of, or wanting to be a physicist and then becoming a physicist also entails a certain amount of wanting to understand as well. So it's not just solving a problem, but it's developing an understanding of the problem. Which is probably what you're saying. You can solve a problem by going through the textbooks and looking, where has this problem been done before? I'm going to take this line and I'm going to use this formula and solve the problem.
Yeah,
and here's
but if you don't understand
but solving the problem comes to understanding the problem.
Yeah, and the nature of the system.
And the nature of it, yeah. So I think really
before we call it quits, I've got
3 hours and 3 minutes.
I've got an interesting little riddle. You might have heard it before. You've got a goat, a wolf, and a cabbage.
How'd you get them to the other side?
Yeah.
What was it?
You
have the 3. You can only take 2 in the boat.
Yes.
And
you can only take 1 in the boat with you. I mean, you're there, so two things can fit in the boat at each time.
Wait, so
you, 3 things in total, you and 2 other things.
No, it's you. You've got a cabbage. You've got a wolf, and you've got a goat.
Can you send 2 things other than yourself?
Well, you can't get the boat back though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Oh, okay, right. So you have to leave. Yeah. So
you go with the goat.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, because then when you come back, you either take a cabbage or a wolf.
But the point is that
you can't leave the goat with the cabbage, and you can't leave the wolf.
You go with the.
Excuse me. Is this lateral thinking?
I don't know. I don't know if it could be like downward thinking.
Is it the case that why am I confining myself to a boat?
Yes. No, not a boat. The things that were given are sufficient. There's nothing extra. There's not like you go under the river or you leave the wolf. Why would you take the wolf or something like that?
No, you go with the goat. You come back. You go with the cabbage.
Come back with the goat.
You come back with the goat.
Yeah,
you leave the goat. You go with the wolf. Leave it with the cabbage, and then you come back, and then you go with the goat, and you're all there on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
but
nice.
The trick is that you have
to bring something back. Yeah, it's really nice.
That's just like the Prestige. You have to be able to bring it back.
Oh my god. Yes, it is just like the Prestige.
Oh, that's what he does. He goes I
remember.
I can't remember what he goes. Every magic trick has 3 parts. Is it the turn? No, it's something. Then the turn. Then the Prestige.
Yeah, you show it to them and then you disappear it and then you bring it back or something.
You have to bring it back.
Yes.
And then the bird comes out.
Jeez. Michael Caine. Okay. Right. Let's leave.
Let's bounce.
Yes, bounce. Okay. That was it. 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 That was it.